Chapter 962. The flying sword flew back to Yu Qianzhou's hand with lightning speed, and the expanding blood mist rapidly collapsed. After all the energy was exhausted, it condensed into a blood scab and fell. The surroundings were empty, and Yan Juixing's figure was nowhere to be seen. He escaped. Yu Qianzhou's eyes widened with rage as he quickly scanned the surroundings. Subsequently, he turned into a stream of light and chased after Yan Juixing. In just a short moment, everyone saw Yu Qianzhou going back and forth in all directions. It was obvious that he was searching for the escaped Yan Juixing. After a long time, a high-speed stream of light scuttled back in front of everyone. Yu Qianzhou appeared with an ashen expression and wasn't in a good mood. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. It was needless to say that Yan Juixing had escaped. Wu Sihai asked with a grave expression. What happened? Did he escape? He couldn't help but be worried. Everyone had seen Yan Juixing's capability earlier, and if he was to make a comeback, the Wu clan would inevitably suffer a calamity. Yu Qianzhou kept the divine sword in his hand and nodded with a gloomy expression. That blood escape is truly strange. No one was able to detect the direction he escaped to. I wonder how he was injured by the sword earlier, but with the mystical power of his devil art, I don't think he will die. I wonder where he is hiding after he is severely injured. It will be great if we can find him and kill him. Wu Sihai spoke with concern. Yu Qianzhou seemed to have recalled something after hearing the statement. He looked at the faint palm print on Wu Lishue's face and suddenly glared at the 10,000 demons' disciples in the crowd. Those disciples were so frightened that they slowly retreated to the back of the crowd. Who knew that Yu Qianzhou would let out a cold snort and clawed at the air with his fingers? Ah! There were miserable screams, and a few bundles of white smoke exploded in the crowd. This action immediately frightened the disciples of the various sects, causing them to flee in panic. A few ferocious dried corpses fell straight down. Before they could even land on the ground, they had already crashed into the old trees in the forest below. Their bodies were already smashed into pieces, and they could not be more dead. Everyone immediately gasped and looked at Yu Qianzhou with lingering fear. It was the first time they had seen such a terrifying method of killing people without leaving a trace. Wu Sihai and the others were no exception, and all of them were extremely shocked. To them, this scene was even more terrifying than the scene of Yan Juixing being heavily injured. Everyone finally remembered that if Yu Qianzhou wanted to kill them, he could do it as easily as lifting his hand. He wouldn't even need to expend any effort. Wu Lishue was so frightened by the terrifying scene that he closed his eyes, not daring to take another look. Do you like watching a good show? Yu Qianzhou looked at the crowd coldly and said, I'm not in a good mood right now. If you don't want to die, scram. Once the statement was out, the various sects' disciples immediately ran away, leaving only the Wu clansmen. Wu Sihai lamented in his heart. The current Yu Qianzhou was no longer the scum of the cultivation world that everyone wanted to beat up. He looked at the empty surroundings and said, Yu Qianzhou, this isn't the place to talk. Let's go back to the Wu clan first. Among everyone present, he was probably the only one who had the qualifications to order Yu Qianzhou around. It wasn't because of his identity as the Wu clan head, but because he was Wu Lishue's grandfather. However, Yu Qianzhou let out a cold snort and said, There is no need. I have something to ask you. How did Shui get brought here by Yan Juixing, and the rest of your Wu clan did not know about it? As he spoke, his merciless gaze swept across the entire Wu clan, causing everyone to feel uneasy. Yu Qianzhou, I wanted to come out on my own. Wu Lishue immediately told the story of how she was tricked by Yan Juixing to come out. She also begged for her sisters who helped her out of kindness. Yu Qianzhou was startled. Once this last spoke, he really couldn't bear to pursue the matter. He then asked, You're saying that Yan Juixing can change into someone else's appearance? Wu Lishue nodded while Yu Qianzhou frowned. No wonder he saw Yan Juixing wearing clothes that were a size smaller than a normal person. So this was the reason. After some consideration, Yu Qianzhou looked at Wu Sihai and the others and said, As long as Yan Juixing isn't dead, Shui won't be safe in the Wu clan. I want to bring Shui-er away. As Shui-er's elders, what do you think? A trace of joy flashed across Wu Lishua's face. She looked at the Wu clan members uneasily. She naturally wanted to stay by Yu Qianzhou's side. The Wu clan members looked at each other. Wu Sihai smiled awkwardly and said, "As long as Shui-er and her parents agree, the rest is up to you. We naturally won't have any opinions." Although he said that, he knew that since Yu Qianzhou had made a decision, it would be difficult for others to interfere. Hence, he turned around and gave a few instructions to the person behind him. Not long after that person left, he brought Wu Lishua's parents, Wu Huaqian and Zhu Xuanqiu. When they heard that their daughter was almost killed by Yan Zhuixing, they were terrified. Fortunately, Yu Qianzhou came in time to save her. When they heard that Yu Qianzhou wanted to bring their daughter away for her safety, the couple felt that it should be so. They believed that no one in the Wu clan could protect their daughter from Yan Zhuixing, and their daughter would only be safer if she followed Yu Qianzhou. However, they were reluctant to part with her, so the couple kept reminding Wu Lishua to take care of herself. After some instructions, the mother-in-law, Zhu Xuanqiu, looked at her son-in-law, Yu Qianzhou. Wu Huaqian knew his wife's temper, so he immediately pulled her back. However, Zhu Xuanqiu broke free and warned Yu Qianzhou coldly, "Yu Qianzhou, if my daughter didn't follow you, she wouldn't have been harmed by Yan Zhuixing. So I don't care how capable you are. If you dare to mistreat my Shui, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost. Do you hear me?" As the saying goes, a mother-in-law was very confident in teaching her son-in-law a lesson. It was perfectly justified. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He finally experienced the power of the legendary mother-in-law in his previous life. He didn't even say a word and didn't even have a chance to explain. She immediately taught him a lesson. She was even scarier than Yan Zhuixing. Yu Qianzhou's arrogance of being the world's #1 was instantly swept away by his mother-in-law. He bowed awkwardly and said, No, take care." He was trembling with fear and did not dare to stay any longer. After bowing to the couple, he immediately pulled Wu Lishua, who was bowing to him, and turned into a stream of light, disappearing without a trace. He no longer had the confidence to deal with Yan Zhuixing. The remaining Wu clan members looked at each other and the angry Zhu Xuanqiu. They suddenly felt it was a little funny. They didn't expect Zhu Xuanqiu to scare Yu Qianzhou to the point that his face changed color. In the depths of the southern sea purple bamboo forest, Wu Lishua, who had her eyes closed, was pulled by Yu Qianzhou. When she opened her eyes, she saw the unusually beautiful purple bamboo swaying in the wind. The fresh air, which was filled with spiritual qi, and the pieces of purple bamboo leaves that were floating down, simply made one feel relaxed and happy. Wu Lishua asked curiously, "This is the legendary southern sea purple bamboo forest?" Yu Qianzhou replied with a "N." He saw that she was still holding the dead crow in her arms, so he pulled it over to take a look. When he realized that it was already dead, he casually threw it into the bamboo forest. He then comforted Wu Lishua with a sigh. "The crow can be buried in the purple bamboo forest after its death. I believe its spirit will be happy if it knows about this." Wu Lishua stared dumbfoundedly at the crow that was thrown aside like a bone. After being speechless for a while, she hurriedly ran to pick it up. She hugged it in her arms and tears flowed down her cheeks. She choked and said, "Sister Phoenix was killed by Yan Zhuixing because she wanted to save me. Before she died, she said that you can save her." Yu Qianzhou scratched his head. He thought to himself, how could a dead thing be saved? However, he couldn't bear to make Wu Lishua sad again, so he smiled apologetically and said, "All right, I will try my best to think of a way. Give it to me. It's so ugly for a beauty to hold a dead thing in her arms." He walked over and was about to grab the dead crow in her arms again. Who knew that Wu Lishua would be scared by his throwing it away like a bone? She immediately kept it in her storage bag and said cautiously with tears rolling down her face, "I will give it to you when you think of a way to save her." Hee. "All right, I will do as you say." Yu Qianzhou was a little gloomy as he pulled her towards Bamboo Lang Paradise. Along the way, This simple-minded girl looked around at the wonders of the purple bamboo forest. Her tears finally dried up, which made Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief. Under the bamboo signboard at the entrance of Bamboo Lang Paradise's courtyard, Nongju crossed her arms and looked at the two people walking out from the bamboo forest path. She was obviously alarmed by the conversation between the two people in the bamboo forest. Her expression didn't look good. Behind her stood a smiling Furong and a wide-eyed Zi. "Wu Lixue, why are you here?" Zi cheered and immediately ran towards the two people. She hugged Wu Lixue. Nongju was slightly surprised. She didn't expect Zi and Wu Lixue to know each other. Her expression became slightly better. Wu Lixue, who came to this legendary place, was a little nervous. Now that she saw Zi, an old friend of the Wu clan, she immediately became happy and lively. The two women chatted continuously. When Furong walked over and intimately hugged Yu Qianqiu's arm, Wu Lixue's cheerful voice immediately stopped. Zi was the only one who could not stop chattering. Yu Qianqiu's forehead immediately broke out in cold sweat. He didn't dare to look back. Nongju stood at the entrance of the courtyard and blocked the way with her arms crossed. She sneered and said, "What? You brought another one back? How many more are you going to bring to my place? Damn it! Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose?" Yu Qianqiu immediately coughed and changed the topic very seriously. "Yan Juixing is not dead. I fought with him again before I came here, but he still escaped." The sneer on Nongju's face immediately disappeared. She said with a serious expression, "What happened?" Seeing that the topic was successfully changed, Yu Qianqiu immediately told her what happened in detail. Unknowingly, Nongju also stepped aside, and they walked into the courtyard. The Black Moon Pagoda in Old Devil Yan's hands is actually a divine weapon and a devil blade personally made by the devil god. Nongju let out a cold breath. After a long time, she came back to her senses and asked in a deep voice, "That guy is a great threat to the human world. What are you going to do?" Chapter 963. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong and Wu Lixue. He didn't answer the question. "I'm most worried about them. I'm here to bring them back to the immortal world." He was now reflecting on the painful experience. He would rather take the risk of the girls not getting along with him to bring them back. Otherwise, it would be too dangerous for them to stay in the human world. Moreover, Yan Juixing could change his appearance. It was simply impossible to guard against him. If one of the girls fell into his hands, he might not be able to save them in time, every time. After all, Yan Juixing was not a fool. If something happened to him, he might regret it for the rest of his life. The girls looked at each other. Nongju frowned and said, "The immortal world is not peaceful. The Heartless Palace is eyeing you covetously. Is it convenient to bring them there? There shouldn't be any big problems in the illusionary immortal city. At least it's safer than the human world." Yu Qianqiu glanced at Zi and said, "You and Zi should go too. I've fought with Yan Juixing before. He does have some tricks up his sleeve, especially the demonic blade in his hand. I'm afraid you're not his opponent now. For safety's sake, let's leave for now." "Yes, yes." Zi's eyes were sparkling as she nodded to persuade her master. Nongju glanced at her angrily and knew what she was thinking. However, when she looked at the purple bamboo forest around her, she hesitated. Obviously, she couldn't let it go. After all, the purple bamboos here were his favorite. Yu Qianqiu knew what she was thinking. He smiled and said, "Aren't the disciples of Southern Ming nearby? Let them take care of it for now. When the time is right, everyone can come back. There's nothing to worry about." Nongju nodded and said, "That's all we can do." After a short discussion, they decided to leave immediately without further ado. Nongju flew away to look for the disciples of the Southern Ming Empire. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, headed straight for the backyard of Zhu Lang Blessed Land. Yu Qianqiu came to the door of a bamboo house that looked like a stilted building. Just as he was hesitating whether he should push the door open or not, the bamboo door opened with a creak. The allure seductress held the door with one hand and looked behind him to make sure there was no one behind him. She leaned against the door gracefully and looked at him with her bright eyes, which made Yu Qianzhou's heart palpitate. He coughed and said, Are you used to living here?" The allure beauty covered her mouth and giggled. She then asked with a smile, "Are you here to see me and say goodbye? Or are you wondering if I'm among the people you're taking away?" Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou was stunned. Obviously, Nongzhu had already woken up from her meditation. The distance between the front and the back of the yard was not big, so it was not difficult for her to overhear the conversation between Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu. Obviously, she had heard what she should have heard. "Did you hear all of it?" Then he said with a wry smile, "Yan Juexing already knew the relationship between you and me. When we were in Lingfang Valley, he used you to threaten me. It's not safe for you to stay in the human world. You'd better leave with me." The allure beauty stretched out her arms and touched her hair. Then she shook her head with a smile and said, "I won't leave."
"Why?"
Yu Qianzhou frowned and said, "It's not too late for you to come back after I find a way to deal with that guy.
"Please believe me."
I'm just leaving for a while. You can come back later if you want." "Of course I believe you. If I didn't believe you, I wouldn't have abandoned my sect and everything to follow you to the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Now I'm alone and have no one to rely on. Who else can I trust except you?" The allure beauty winked at him and said. She really couldn't stand it. Yu Qianzhou turned his head to avoid looking at her face. He made way for her and said, "You go to the front yard and meet with them. I'll go wake Yanyu up. We'll leave together later." He thought she had agreed. Unexpectedly, the allure beauty shook her head slowly and said, "You guys go." "I won't go. Anyway, I'm alone and have no one to love me. If Yan Juexing kills me, then so be it. That way, you won't pity me and I'll be a burden by your side. I don't want to be someone else's burden." Yu Qianzhou looked back and was speechless.
What was she talking about?
He then said with a wry smile, "Aren't you just saying that out of anger? Did I offend you in some way?" The allure beauty tilted her head and looked at him curiously. She blinked her eyes and said, "Don't you know where you offended me? This woman really knows how to rub my sore spot." Yu Qianzhou felt guilty. Why did he feel that this woman was leading him astray again? So he pretended to be at a loss and shook his head repeatedly. "I really don't know." The allure beauty sneered and said, "Okay, then come in and I'll tell you." She stretched out her jade-like arm and directly grabbed the clothes on Yu Qianzhou's chest. She forcefully pulled him in and closed the door. She then set up a soundproof enchantment in the room. She straightened her chest and pressed Yu Qianzhou step by step. "Why don't you continue to pretend?" She had already thrown caution to the wind. She knew that if she didn't take this opportunity to force Yu Qianzhou to break the window paper, it would be even more difficult in the future. After thinking about it for all these years, she finally understood that the past was in the past. She was still the allure beauty who dared to love and hate. Why should she be bound by invisible constraints and be entangled in the middle of the night when no one was around? So she resolutely decided to be herself. At the same time, she also decided to tear off the hypocritical mask of that lecherous but cowardly guy. Everyone had a clear understanding of the matter. There was no need to face hypocrisy with a conscience. What she liked was what she liked. What did it have to do with others? Of course, it took a lot of courage to make such a decision. It was difficult for her to make up her mind alone. It was someone else who really made her make this decision, and this person was in the bamboo house next door. Especially after hearing the conversation between Yu Qianzhou and Nongzhu, that person immediately came up with an idea to let her threaten Yu Qianzhou at this time. Yanyu, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opened her eyes after the two people next door entered the room and stopped moving. She smiled bitterly and shook her head. She had seen many things between men and women in the dormant spring house. In this aspect, nothing could be hidden from her eyes. After getting along with the allure beauty for a long time, she naturally found out the secret of the allure beauty. Otherwise, why did the allure beauty go to the cornucopia to find Yu Qianzhou in the dormant spring house? It should be known that the more unruly a woman looked on the surface, once she fell in love with a man, She could really do anything. She could die with just a word. This kind of woman could not afford to be hurt. If it was just the wishful thinking of the Allure Beauty, she would not have fanned the flames. No woman liked her man to have many women. However, she also saw the guilty conscience hidden in the bottom of Yu Qianzhou's heart. If he was open-minded, why would he have a guilty conscience? It was only because of some special reasons that he didn't dare to take even half a step out of line. Finally, there was the scene next door. Yan Yu didn't know whether she had done a good deed, or if she had done something stupid. In fact, she knew in her heart that the reason why she did this was not because she was willing, but because of her inferiority due to being born in a brothel. In addition, she cared too much about Yu Qianzhou and was afraid of losing him. She just wanted to please Yu Qianzhou, but why was there a trace of bitterness in her mouth that was difficult to swallow? Yu Qianzhou had never been so afraid before when he saw the Allure Temptress's large breasts pressing against him. He retreated in a panic until he was forced to the wall and had nowhere to retreat. He raised his hand and smiled bitterly. I surrender. I surrender. Stop right there. What do you want? Seeing his trembling appearance, the Allure Beauty was angry and funny at the same time. She bit her red lips and said, "In the past, I would go wherever you told me to go, and I would not say anything if you took me, but today, I want a reason. Why do you want me to listen to you like this?" With a cold expression, Yu Qianzhou put down his hands and stood up straight. He said indifferently, "Don't get the wrong idea. You and I have known each other for a long time. I just don't want Yan Zhuixing to use you to threaten me. There is no other meaning. It is not what you think at all." These words should be enough to hurt a woman's heart, but the Allure Beauty did not take it seriously. She asked with a smile, "What else?" Under such pressure, Yu Qianzhou could not pretend anymore. He said with a bitter smile that he also wanted to avoid. "The biggest reason is naturally because you are my master's wife. I have the responsibility and obligation to protect your safety. Go to hell." Hearing this, the Allure Beauty flew into a rage. She directly grabbed Yu Qianzhou's lower body with one hand and grabbed his penis. Yu Qianzhou was so shocked that he almost forgot about the pain. His nerves were numb for 3 seconds. Immediately, he was in so much pain that tears almost came out. He shouted, "Stinky bitch, quickly give me your hand. You are King crazy. Quickly let go. If you don't let go, don't blame me for being rude. There is no good man, especially a perverted man like you, who has no guts. You are a good-for-nothing even if you are alive." The Allure Beauty did not loosen her grip on his lower body. Instead, she increased her strength. She gritted her teeth and said, "I have already shamelessly sent myself to you. Why are you still pretending? How many days have you known House Sancy? When I broke up with House Sancy, I don't even know if your grandfather was born. Since when did you become a filial son and disciple to care about my affairs? A useless man like you is useless in his lower body. It is better for me to castrate you myself and cut off my future thoughts." "You are crazy," Yu Qianzhou roared. His body suddenly emitted green flames, wanting to force the other party to retreat. However, the Allure Beauty had already thrown caution to the wind. Enduring the unbearable pain, she clenched her teeth and closed her eyes. She shook her head and said, "If you do not give me a reason today, I will not let go even if I die. If you have the ability, then kill me. You King, let go." Ouch, it hurts. It hurts. Yu Qianzhou really wanted to force out the purple flames and burn the devil's claw that was grabbing him. However, he could not bear to do that. Ouch, he gave in and said, tell me, what kind of reason do you want?" Chapter 964. Not long after, a faint red mist rose from Highway's head. It had a slight smell of blood, and it slowly dissipated into the air. Not long after, Highway slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Qianzhou in front of him, he recalled everything that had happened. His forehead was instantly covered in sweat. He turned around and knelt in front of Yu Qianzhou. He said sorrowfully, "This subordinate deserves to die. I have failed Mister's trust." Whether I deserve to die or not, we can talk about it later. Tell me what happened first. Yu Qianqiu said calmly, with a fishing rod on his shoulder. In fact, Hai Wei and the others did not know his real secret, so he had nothing to worry about. After Hai Wei told him everything that had happened, Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. If that's the case, I'm afraid that Imo Xiaojun, Tianyi, and Li Qiuxiang's situation are similar to yours. He did not expect Yan Juexing to be so vigilant that he could discover Hai Wei and the others. Before coming here, he had only refined the awakening pill to make complete preparations. As for whether or not someone had been controlled by Yan Juexing, he could not guarantee it. However, with his methods, Hai Wei was no match for him. After a slight test, he immediately revealed his true colors. It was even more impossible for him to escape from him. This subordinate not only delayed Mister's matter, but also harmed my own brothers. This subordinate deserves to die. Please punish me, Mister. Hai Wei knelt there with a pale face.
All right.
It's not your fault. It was my own negligence. How could you be a match for Yan Juexing? Get up. After calling Hai Wei, who was repeatedly thanking him, to his feet, Yu Qianqiu looked coldly in the direction of the 10,000 demons. He then took out a jade talisman and crushed it. A faint glow quickly dissipated in the air. Not long after, Hai Wei abruptly raised his head and looked to his left and right. He saw streaks of light flying past his head at an extremely fast speed, fanning out in the direction of the 10,000 demons. Just as he was about to say something, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, "Come and meet me at Xiaojuan's place." Seeing Yu Qianqiu's nonchalant expression, Hai Wei immediately understood that the group of experts flying over his head were Yu Qianqiu's men. Alarmed, he cupped his hands and said, "Yes." By the time he raised his head, Yu Qianqiu had already disappeared. His guess was right. These people were indeed Yu Qianqiu's men. They were the 3,000 people that Yu Qianqiu had brought from the hero army that he had trained in the Divine Ruin realm. After Yu Qianqiu gave the order, the 3,000 immortal experts who had already surrounded the 10,000 demons immediately moved towards the 10,000 demons. Their purpose was to flatten the 10,000 demons. Perhaps sending such a powerful lineup to deal with the 10,000 demons was making a mountain out of a molehill, but he was here to completely flatten the 10,000 demons. If he sent other forces in the human world, he was afraid that there would inevitably be fish that slipped through the net. Apart from wanting to cut off all of Yan Juexing's external help, he also wanted to use the thunderous momentum of quickly raising the myriad demons' palace to intimidate the others. This was to prevent people from not being able to see the situation clearly and secretly assisting Yan Juexing. At the same time, the Green Gang and the Hong Gang had already sent out a large number of people, mobilizing and joining forces with various sects to clean up all the disciples of the 10,000 demons in the Chinese cultivation world and search for Yan Juexing. Sikong Ju of the World Chamber of Commerce had also used the huge network of the World Chamber of Commerce to pass on Yu Qianqiu's decree to the forces of various countries. Any disciple of the 10,000 demons would be killed without mercy, and Yan Juexing would be rewarded with 10 billion high-grade spirit stones if he was found and reported. All the news would also be fed back to Yu Qianqiu at any time through the huge network of the World Chamber of Commerce. What was even more extreme was that because Yu Qianqiu knew that Yan Juexing needed the blood of virgins to cultivate the demonic arts, he issued an order to the world that no matter where, once a woman was found to have disappeared or died for no reason, the local forces must immediately investigate the cause of the disappearance or death, or else they would be severely punished. From this, it could be seen that Yu Qianqiu clearly wanted to force Yan Juexing to death this time, and he would not stop until he killed him. As a result, many people sighed endlessly. Nowadays, there was absolutely no one else in the whole world who could mobilize such a huge force at any time except for Yu Qianqiu. As expected, Imo Xiaojun and Hai Wei both ran away after being probed by Yu Qianqiu, but he was caught by Yu Qianqiu on the spot with his fishing rod. By the time Hai Wei arrived, Imo Xiaojun, who had woken up after taking the Spirit Awakening pill, was so scared that he was sweating profusely and begging for forgiveness. Yu Qianqiu did not say much. He looked at the two of them and said, "You two go to the 100 Flowers Valley and meet me." After that, he directly flew in the direction of the 10,000 demons. When he flew to the 10,000 demons, the encirclement had already come to an end. All the buildings of the 10,000 demons had been turned into ruins. Not a single intact building could be found, and there were corpses everywhere. Think about it. Even if all the disciples of the 10,000 demons joined forces, how could they be a match for 3,000 immortal experts? It was a massacre without any ability to fight back. Where the multicolored lights were concentrated, miserable screams could be heard incessantly. Yu Qianqiu quickly flew over, and when he saw the hundreds of people huddled in front of a cave, he said to Zhang Peng, who was commanding the battle, "Stop for a moment." The black-masked Zhang Peng quickly gave the order to stop the attack, and the 3,000 masked immortal experts immediately stopped and surrounded the place. Among the hundreds of people of the 10,000 demons, there were Yan Wuchen and Yan Bugui, the palace master of the 10,000 demons, Bu Yunxiao, the elders, consecrators, and disciples of the 10,000 demons, as well as Man Hu and his martial brothers. Third brother Xian was also among them. One by one, the battered and exhausted people suddenly realized that their ferocious opponents had stopped attacking. They trembled with fear and felt a little surprised. When they looked around, they immediately noticed that Yu Qianqiu was floating in the air, staring at them coldly. "Yu Qianqiu, the 10,000 demons have no enmity with you. Why did you kill us like this?" The palace master of the 10,000 demons, Bu Yunxiao, pointed his sword at the sky and roared in anger. Countless disciples of the 10,000 demons had died, and now the entire 10,000 demons was going to end in his hands. How could he not be angry? "Humph," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. "Don't tell me you don't know why." Bu Yunxiao, who was still about to roar, was pulled back by his master, Yan Wuchen. Yan Wuchen, whose clothes were ragged and his face was covered in blood, shook his head and laughed miserably. "I was worried that such a day would come, but I always held on to a trace of hope. I didn't expect this day to come so soon. Unfortunately, he didn't listen to my advice. So much so that I implicated the entire 10,000 demons. I am the sinner of the 10,000 demons." He then pulled his son, Yan Bugui. The father and son looked at each other without saying a word. Only the winner was the king, and the loser was the bandit. The sad wind messed up the blood-stained white hair of the father and son. Yan Wuchen suddenly looked up at the sky and said, "Yu Qianqiu, for the sake of our friendship, let the rest of the 10,000 demons go. Everything was caused by my Yan clan, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. Please let the disciples of the 10,000 demons go. They didn't know anything. As long as you let them go, my father and I are willing to commit suicide in front of you." "Master, don't." Bu Yunxiao and Qiu Yuan screamed at the same time. The rest of the 10,000 demons looked at the father and son with resentment. It was impossible to say that they didn't hate them, even if Yan Wuchen was the previous sect leader. Corpses were everywhere on the ground, and the sky was clear, with only a few white clouds drifting by. Yu Qianqiu, who was floating in the air, stared at the ground and sneered. "Yan Wuchen, you are also a hero of your generation. Let me ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do?" "I understand what you mean." Yan Wuchen laughed miserably. "Indeed, I will not be lenient. I have done things like exterminating an entire sect many times. It seems like karma has come. But this is the mistake that this old man has committed. How can I let the entire palace of myriad devils bear it together? That way, after I die, I won't have the face to face my master. I won't have the face to face the ancestors of the palace of myriad devils." After saying that, he suddenly looked at Yan Bugui and shouted, "Close your eyes." Yan Bugui, whose face was covered in blood, looked at his father in confusion. When he saw the sword in his father's hand, he immediately understood everything. He knelt in front of his father and kowtowed while crying, "It is all because of your unfilial son that I caused this disaster, father. Your son's death will not be regretted. In my next life, I will serve you again, even if I have to be an ox or a horse." Yan Wuchun was so emotional that his face was trembling. He grabbed Yan Bugui's hair with one hand and raised the sword in the other. Bu Yunxiao and Qiu Wuyuan screamed and knelt down, hugging him. Master, don't. Yan Wuchun was indeed a fierce and ambitious person. He could win and lose. He kicked his two disciples away and shouted, "Now that things have come to this, don't be stupid." There was a flash of silver light in his hand, and his son's hot blood sprayed on him. Eldest, martial brother. Bu Yunxiao and Qiu Wuyuan exclaimed in unison. Yan Wuchun held his sword in one hand and his son's head in the other. He faced Yu Qianqiu with his eyes wide open and shouted in a sorrowful voice, "We will bear the consequences of our mistakes. Yu Qianqiu, please let the rest of the 10,000 demons go. I will repay you in my next life." Then, he threw his son's head away and grabbed his messy hair with one hand. The sword in his other hand flashed, and the hot blood rushed to the sky. "Master!" The two disciples cried in sorrow. Yan Wuchun didn't fall even after he cut off his own head. He threw his head away forcefully, and his body lost its center of gravity and fell backward into the arms of two disciples. Following the death of the father and son, the resentment that had accumulated in the hearts of the people of the myriad demons' palace also dissipated when the two heads fell to the ground. The Yan father and son had finally given the myriad demons' palace an explanation. The remaining several hundred disciples of the myriad demons' palace all knelt down and kowtowed to Yan Wuchun's headless corpse. Many of them were so moved by Yan Wuchun's act of sacrifice that they choked with sobs. Coupled with the countless corpses that had died tragically all around them, the atmosphere down below became extremely gloomy. Yu Qianqiu silently looked at Yan Wuchun's headless body. After a long time, he squinted his eyes and pointed at third brother Exian. He said to Zhang Peng, "He won't die for now." Zhang Peng immediately teleported down and restrained the unprepared third brother Exian. In the blink of an eye, he flashed back into the sky. However, the meaning of Yu Qianqiu's words was very clear. The people below immediately cursed. Qiu Wuyuan hugged his master's headless body and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, you will die a horrible death." Man Hu and his fellow disciples fearlessly rushed towards Yu Qianqiu and shouted in unison, "Avenge, master!" Zhang Peng waved his hand and directly ordered, "Kill." Chapter 965. Senior brother Man Hu and the others knew that it was impossible for them to escape from Yu Qianqiu alive. Hence, they decided to self-detonate their dantian and kill Yu Qianqiu to avenge their master Bing Qingzi. However, the difference in cultivation between the two sides was too great. Before they could reach the sky, countless rays of light shot towards them and turned them into a rain of blood. Even though the remaining several hundred disciples of the myriad demons' palace were united against a common enemy, it was impossible for them to withstand the attacks of 3,000 immortal experts. In an instant, fierce rays of light blinded their eyes, and miserable screams rang out incessantly. In just a short moment, not a single corpse could be found on the ground. Severed limbs and a bloody mess covered the ground, and the thick smell of blood was suffocating. Following Zhang Peng's order, the 3,000 members of the heroes quickly scattered in all directions to search for survivors. Floating in the air, Yu Qianqiu took out a spirit-awakening pill and slapped it into the mouth of third Exian, who was clamped under Zhang Peng's arm. At this moment, a groan came from the pile of corpses. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng looked over in surprise. They didn't expect that someone could survive such a fierce attack. The broken limbs were lifted up, and a bloody man sat up. To be exact, he didn't have the lower half of his body, and there was a big hole in his chest. It was a miracle that he didn't die, but he wasn't far from death. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and recognized Qiu Wuyuan. Qiu Wuyuan was gasping for breath, and it seemed that he could collapse at any time. Fortunately, his arms were still in good condition, and he supported the lower half of his body. After turning his head around, he realized that the corpses of his master and senior martial brother were nowhere to be found. He couldn't help but start crying. He was supposed to be bawling, but the lower half of his body was leaking air. In the end, He cried like a female ghost who had died an unjust death. His voice was hoarse, and it made people panic. His tears could no longer flow. He tried his best to look around, hoping to find a fellow disciple who was still alive. However, how could he find a complete corpse in a pool of blood? Who knew that when he moved a little too much, half of his body would sway, and his arms would clumsily support his back. When he stabilized his body, he saw Yu Qianzhou in the air. Their gazes intertwined and became extremely complicated. The enmity between them had already vanished like smoke in thin air, and the gazes they used to look at each other had returned to the distant past. Yu Qianzhou remembered the difficult days after he entered the cultivation world. He was lucky enough to not die in Ongquangsung. After he escaped from Ongquangsung like a stray dog, he didn't dare to come out and hide in the pillar of the state general's residence. Later, he met Guan Yu, and under Guan Yu's lead, he went to the Hundred Flowers Valley. It was in the Hundred Flowers Valley's Hundred Flowers house that he met a slightly sloppy old man. The two of them were drinking and chatting at the same table. That sloppy old man was Qiu Yuan, who was now on the brink of death. That was the first time he met Qiu Yuan. After that, the encounters between the two of them appeared before Yu Qianzhou's eyes like smoke. He really couldn't match the bloody man in front of him who was about to die. Yu Qianzhou almost couldn't remember anything else. These years had passed in a hurry. He had always been busy searching for the supreme path, wanting to break free from the misfortune of his previous life. Many people and matters had been left behind by him one by one. In short, he had killed a lot of people, and his hands were stained with blood. He didn't know if it was because he was really cruel or because he had always been estranged from the people and things in this world. The first thing that came to Qiu Yuan's mind was the scene in the Hundred Flowers house. He met two young men while drinking alone. One of them was the guy who flattered him, Yu Qianzhou in front of him. As for the other one, he didn't seem to have seen him again. After they parted ways, he only had a slight impression of this flattering young man because he was a little interesting. He didn't even think that he would meet him again because he was just an insignificant individual cultivator. His status was worlds apart from his. However, after so many years, the rise of this young man could be called a miracle. Many people couldn't stop him even if they wanted to. As a result, he walked step by step to where he was today. He was even strong enough to destroy 10,000 demons with a wave of his hand. If he had known this earlier, he would have killed him to prevent future troubles. But who would have thought that this day would come? Who would pay any attention to an insignificant wandering cultivator? Things are human not. Qiu Yuan's throat spat out a few inaudible words. His eyes that were looking at the sky gradually became dull and lifeless. Bang! Zhang Peng slashed out a ray of light and blew him into pieces on the spot. Yu Qianzhou was also startled by this sound and woke up from his memories. Looking at the scene of corpses below him, his Adam's apple moved slightly. When he turned to glance at Zhang Peng, he saw that third Exion's eyes were unfocused and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he had remembered something. Yu Qianzhou took a deep breath of the air that was filled with a thick smell of blood. He looked at Third Exion and sneered. Third Exion, you've finally woken up. You must have had this dream for a long time. Did you remember anything? Zhang Peng immediately grabbed the back of Third Exion's neck by his clothes and dragged him in front of Yu Qianzhou. Third Exion slowly raised his bloody face and looked at Yu Qianzhou with a bitter expression. Yu Qianzhou, let me go back to Lingfeng Valley and find my master to apologize. I will cut my throat in front of my master.
You don't have to do it.
Lingfeng Valley?
Your master?
Yu Qianzhou laughed as if he had heard a funny joke. He shook his head and said, with your help, Lingfeng Valley has long been destroyed by Yan Juexing. In order to save your brothers, your master was humiliated by Yan Juexing. He almost lost his life. As for your brothers, none of them were spared. All of them were killed by Yan Juexing. Today's Lingfeng Valley has already become a barren mountain. Your master has also left disheartened. Only the souls of your brothers are lingering here. You're just an animal that helps a tiger do evil. What do you want to go back to see? After hearing this, Third Exian looked at Yu Qianzhou with fear in his eyes. It was as if he had seen a ghost. His chest was heaving up and down, and he was holding his breath. But in the end, he could not hold his breath. He spat out a mouthful of blood and asked in a trembling voice, "Is what you said true? Yan Zhuixing never abandoned you and kept you by his side. He trusted you so much. Didn't he tell you about this?" Yu Qianzhou snorted coldly and said, "Everyone in the cultivation world knows about this. If it weren't for our friendship, you would have died by my hands long ago. Do you think there's any point in me lying to you?" Third brother Exian was stunned like a wooden chicken. After struggling for a long time, Yu Qianzhou signaled Zhangpeng to let go and said, "For the sake of your master, I won't kill you. Get lost." "Where's my master? I want to see her." Third Exian asked with a bleak expression.
I think you can forget about that.
"Your master has finally recovered from her sadness and despair. It would be strange if she didn't get agitated when she sees you." Yu Qianzhou sneered. "I understand." Third brother Exian nodded silently. He took out a jade archive from his storage pouch and wrote something on it. After he was done, he handed it to Yu Qianzhou and said, "I'll have to trouble you to pass this to my master." "That won't be a problem." Yu Qianzhou received the jade archive and skimmed through its contents. He was shocked and shouted, "Old Third Exian you." However, he was too late to stop Old Third Exian. He saw Old Third Exian's chest puff out as a hole appeared where his heart should have been. Finally, blood gushed out of his mouth. It was unclear what Old Third Exian was mumbling, but it was probably some sort of apology. Then, Old Third Exian plummeted to the ground. Yu Qianzhou held the jade archive in his hand as he watched Third Brother Exian fall from the sky. He was speechless. Initially, he wanted to incite Third Brother Exian to help him be a spy. Based on his understanding of Yan Zhuixing, he wanted to see if he could find Yan Zhuixing, who knew that he might have overdone it. Instead of seeking revenge, Yan Zhuixing felt guilty and committed suicide by exploding his heart meridian. What a mess! Yu Qianzhou looked at the jade archive in his hand. It was filled with words of apology to Lu Yanqing. His reaction was a little slow. "Damn it! You sure have it easy. You committed a bunch of mistakes, and yet you don't know how to repent. You just die." Yu Qianzhou muttered as he looked down. When he raised his head, the 3,000 men had returned. Zhangping took a head count and reported. Yu Qianzhou looked around and waved his hand expressionlessly. Everyone disappeared into thin air. However, all that was left were ruins. The corpses in the pools of blood painted a picture of the aftermath of a great battle. As the thick smell of blood spread, it soon attracted a large number of eagles and other birds to circle in the sky. The carnivores hiding deep in the mountains also began to poke their heads out of their caves. Smelling the blood in the air, they became unusually excited and restless. In the sky above the back mountain of the 100 Flowers Valley, Amano and Li Qiuxiang hung their heads in fear behind Yu Qianzhou. Yu Qianzhou looked deeply at the magnificent 100 Flowers Palace on the top of the mountain in the distance. He had wanted to bring people to destroy the 100 Flowers Palace in one fell swoop, but when he recalled Qiu Wuyuan's gaze before he died, a string in his heart moved. He remembered his promise to Ma Jugu of Fu Xian Island, that he would take care of Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter. It was also because of this that he did not bring back the 3,000 men from the 10,000 demons to the realm of gods after sending them back to the 100 Flowers Valley. Otherwise, according to his previous plan, the 100 Flowers Valley would not be able to escape. Even so, he still had to do what he had to do. This time, he would not stop until he killed Yan Zhuixing. It won't be long before Mo Xiaojun and Highway come to the 100 Flowers Valley. After you meet up, go to the Honggang and Qinggang to assist Hongqi and Gu Qingyun. When you see them, tell them to spread the news along with the forces of the World Commerce Association. Yu Qianzhou immediately told them about the destruction of the 10,000 demons, especially the tragic scene of Yan Wuchen and Yan Bugui committing suicide. He wanted to see if Yan Zhuixing would come to seek revenge after hearing about this. Chapter 966. The atmosphere in the 100 Flowers Valley was still the same, The style that had lasted for many years had never changed. However, compared to usual, the atmosphere was a bit different. The reason was naturally because Yan Juexing had caused Yu Qianqiu to order his men to attack the 10,000 demons. Many people were guessing that the next target would be Bai Hua Palace. While people were whispering in the streets and alleys of the 100 Flowers Valley, there was a sudden explosion in the sky. Even the ground trembled. Everyone looked up in shock, only to see a streak of light forcefully breaking through the defensive formation of the 100 Flowers Valley, directly barging in and floating in the sky. Everyone looked at the newcomer with fear. How could a person who could forcefully break through the defensive formation be ordinary? The surroundings were silent, as if everything had frozen in time. Everyone looked up at the sky without moving. The old people who had lived in the 100 Flowers Valley for a long time recognized Yu Qianqiu. After seeing that the newcomer was Yu Qianqiu, many people began to ponder. They were afraid that the newcomer had ill intentions and was looking for trouble with Bai Hua Palace. Sure enough, after Yu Qianqiu glanced down, he turned into a streak of light and directly shot towards Bai Hua Palace. Whispers immediately spread in the 100 Flowers Valley. There were already many people in Bai Hua Palace who were uneasy because Yan Juexing had offended Yu Qianqiu. The loud sound immediately shocked everyone in the palace. Before they could see who the newcomer was, a streak of light directly broke through the mountain gate and landed in front of Bai Hua Palace, standing face to face with Bai Hua Palace mistress, who just happened to come out to see what was going on. Guanmu Xue, long time no see. Yu Qianqiu stared coldly at Bai Hua Fairy and directly called out her name. It sounded like he had come with ill intentions. Bai Hua Fairy looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression. She had naturally heard about how her son was heavily wounded by Yu Qianqiu and had to run away. Facing Yu Qianqiu, who injured her son, she didn't have much resentment. After all, it was her son who took the initiative to cause trouble this time. She only hated herself for not being able to stop her son. Now that things had come to this, it was too late to say anything. Let's do what needs to be done. Bai Hua Fairy slightly bowed, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. Her hair had already turned white. Exhaustion was evident on her face. Obviously, she had not been less worried about Yan Juexing. Yu Qianqiu, what do you want? A figure flashed by. Yan Zixia's eyes were red and swollen as she stood in front of her mother, as if worried that Yu Qianqiu would do something to her mother. From the looks of it, she had been crying. Yu Qianqiu's gaze stopped for a bit at Yan Zixia's face, then said, "Move aside. I have something to talk to your mother about." "No." Yan Zixia protected her mother with all her might and shouted, "My brother's matter has nothing to do with my mother. If you want to kill someone, just kill me." Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. "Bai Hua Fairy, don't tell me that Yan Juexing didn't come to find you before he started this. He already knew from Li Qiuxiang and Tian Yi that Yan Juexing had come, so he couldn't hide it from him even if he wanted to." "Zixia, move aside." Bai Hua Fairy pulled Yan Zixia away. Her expression returned to normal, then extended her arm towards Yu Qianqiu. "Ew. Torture envoy, please come inside. We can talk inside. With Yu Qianqiu's current status in the cultivation world, it's already a bit inappropriate to call him by his name, so she changed to calling him Torture Envoy. Yu Qianqiu didn't bother being polite with her, quickly walked past the mother and daughter pair, walking straight into the main hall, and stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. He didn't plan to do anything to Bai Hua Palace this time, but a warning was unavoidable. Bai Hua Fairy held her daughter's hand, telling her not to worry, then waved her hand at the panicking crowd outside, signaling them to leave. She then slowly walked behind Yu Qianqiu and asked, "Torture Envoy, what brings you here today?" "Guanmu Xue, why do you ask when you already know the answer?" As soon as Yu Qianqiu turned around, he stopped talking and looked outside, only to see two figures landing outside the palace gate. Bai Hua Fairy also turned around to look, then exclaimed in surprise, "Great Grandaunt." She quickly went over to support the person. Yan Zixia also called out, "Great Grandaunt." The mother and daughter both supported the person. The clang-clang sound of walking sticks could be heard. The newcomers were none other than Ma Jugu of Fuxian Island and Ferdinand. With Bai Hua Fairy's support, Ma Jugu slowly walked over with her crutches. Her face was already showing signs of old age. It seems that her lifespan is almost up. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ferdinand with a questioning gaze, but Ferdinand shook his head with a wry smile and sent his voice back. Jugu heard that you injured Yan Juexing and gave the order to deal with the 10,000 demons, so she was worried that you would attack Bai Hua Palace again, so she dragged me here with her. I had no choice. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ma Jugu, who was slowly walking over, and understood her intentions. She was afraid that he wouldn't be able to protect Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter, so she dragged her father-in-law here. In fact, the fact that Ferdinand was his father-in-law was only known by the higher-ups of Fuxian Island. Outsiders were strictly forbidden from knowing, so Ma Jugu was naturally one of those who knew. Ma Jugu opened her drooping eyelids and laughed. It seems that my old bones came just in time, just in time. She then walked in front of Yu Qianqiu, cupped her hands and bowed. Greetings, torture envoy. Isn't this disgusting? Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. This old woman's greeting really made him feel uncomfortable. He immediately reached out to support her, then bowed. Greetings, Jugu. Ma Jugu immediately nodded and praised. Good, good, good. It seems that I didn't misjudge you. She first put on a hat, then asked, I heard that Torture Envoy has issued a decree to eradicate the 10,000 demons. Unfortunately, I'm old and useless, otherwise, I would definitely follow Torture Envoy's decree and take the lead to eradicate the 10,000 demons. Please forgive me, Torture Envoy. Saying so, she bowed again and apologized. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He had already experienced this old woman's temperament. She was an old woman who had a needle in a velvet glove, but he couldn't do anything to her. After all, she had helped him several times. Left with no choice, he quickly bowed and supported Ma Jugu. I dare not. I can order anyone, but I dare not order you. However, Yu Qianqiu was not prepared to let the other party casually manipulate him. The hierarchy of people was a matter of status. He had to protect what he needed to protect. Immediately, he said, Besides, the matter of the Myriad Demons Palace has already been resolved. I have already sent people to flatten the Myriad Demons Palace. Yan Wuchen, the culprit who connived with Yan Juexing, apologized in public and personally cut off the head of his son Yan Bugui, then committed suicide. The matter of the 10,000 demons is over, so Jugu doesn't need to worry about it. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly changed. Yu Qianqiu could feel that Ma Jugu's arm, which he was supporting, slightly trembled. Ferdinand was even more dumbfounded as he looked at him. He didn't expect him to eradicate the number 1 demonic sect so quickly. In fact, not much time had passed since the 10,000 demons were eradicated. Yu Qianqiu directly teleported here after finishing the matter over there, so the news didn't have time to spread out. Naturally, no one else knew about it. Yan Bugui is dead. Bai Hua Fairy's face instantly turned pale, and her body staggered a few steps back. In fact, she and Yan Bugui had always had a good relationship. They were forced to separate because they had no other choice. Now that she heard that her husband was dead, she couldn't take the blow. You kill my father. I'm going to kill you. Yan Zixia suddenly roared crazily after a moment of absent-mindedness. She rushed towards Yu Qianqiu, but before she could touch Yu Qianqiu, she was hit by Ma Jugu's Demon Slayer staff and fainted on the spot. Chapter 967. Ma Jugu ignored her, and now was not the time to care about her. There were more important things to deal with. She turned her head to look at the absent-minded Bai Hua Fairy, then looked at Yu Qianqiu and said with a smile, Torture Envoy, you are indeed swift and decisive. May I ask if you are here because that unfilial son of Mu Shui has caused trouble and wants to implicate Bai Hua Palace? Jugu is wise. Yu Qianqiu followed up on her words. Yan Juexing's demonic technique is extremely vicious and has endangered the safety of the entire cultivation world. Before he came out to cause trouble, he came to Bai Hua Palace and met with Bai Hua Fairy, but Bai Hua Fairy concealed it and almost caused a disaster. This is tantamount to becoming the enemy of the entire cultivation world. If he is not punished severely, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince the public. Ferdinand looked at him speechlessly. However, the winner is king, and the loser is the bandit. The winner is always right, so what can others do? Ma Jugu naturally understood this, but she still nodded in agreement. Torture envoy, I deeply admire you for taking care of the safety of the entire cultivation world. However, it is innate for a mother and son to be connected. How many mothers in the world would harm their own son? Moreover, Mu Shui had only met Yan Juexing once and did not help him with anything. This meant that Mu Shui still had a clear view of what was right and what was wrong. She shouldn't be implicated. Don't you think so, torture envoy? Yu Qianqiu looked at this seemingly slow-witted but actually shrewd old woman in front of him and felt a bit of admiration for her. She was already past her prime, but she still ran around for the sake of a younger generation. It was truly admirable. But he still insisted, Jugu is right, but if I don't punish him severely, it will be difficult to convince the public. If this matter is spread out, and someone else helps Yan Juexing, how can I deal with it? Ma Jugu slowly turned her head to look at the absent-minded Bai Hua fairy, then said, I'm sure that only the few of us here know about this matter. If Torture Lord is willing to spare the mother and daughter, I guarantee that no one else will leak this matter, otherwise, Torture Lord can blame it on this old lady. Saying so, she looked at Ferdinand. Ferdinand can be a witness. Hearing this, Ferdinand smiled bitterly in his heart. She wanted him to speak, so he coughed and looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, I can vouch for the mother and daughter to ensure that this matter will not be leaked out. Otherwise, I will be held accountable. Ma Jugu nodded with satisfaction. This was exactly what she wanted. Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered as he looked at the two of them. He remained silent and appeared to be in a difficult position. He wasn't in a hurry to answer. A woman's giggling could be heard from inside Wenqing Palace. A beautiful woman with her beautiful hair tied up in a bun was constantly jumping and dodging, waving the long gauze behind her to tease the little boy who was chasing after her. The little boy had big bright eyes, delicate and cute. He playfully chased after the fluttering gauze. His charmingly naive appearance made the woman chuckle incessantly. Mother, I caught it, I caught it. The little boy grabbed the fluttering palace gauze and cheered. However, he found that his mother was motionless with her back facing him. He ran over and grabbed his mother's hand, shaking it. Mother, mother. He raised his head and stared with his big eyes as if he wanted to call back his mother's attention. However, his mother looked at the door and shouted, Who are you? How dare you trespass here? Guards, guards. But the strange thing was that after she shouted a few times, not a single guard came in. The surroundings were silent. The little boy turned around and saw an unfamiliar man with a pale face slowly walking in without any expression. He quickly stood in front of his mother and shouted with a childish voice, Audacious slave, get out of here. Sure enough, dragons give birth to dragons and phoenixes give birth to phoenixes. The environment dictated it. The person who came was none other than Yan Juexing, who had transformed into Shou Chen. After he was severely injured by Yu Qianqiu, he hid within the borders of the Dayong Kingdom. Who would have thought that after capturing a few girls to restore his body, it would immediately alarm a lot of cultivators who came to search everywhere. He couldn't understand how a few insignificant mortal girls could cause such a big movement in the cultivation world. After he took the opportunity to capture a person to ask, he found out that Yu Qianqiu had already ordered the entire world that as long as a woman disappeared or died without reason, it could be Yan Juexing's doing. The local forces must investigate clearly, or else they would be severely punished. After knowing the details, Yan Juexing immediately gnashed his teeth in anger. Yu Qianqiu obviously knew that he needed a woman to heal him after he was injured, so he set up a large net in the whole world to capture him. It was obvious that he didn't want to give him a chance to recover his injuries and cultivation, and he wanted to force him into a hopeless situation. However, even though he was angry, he had already experienced the high cultivation of Yu Qianqiu. He was not his opponent at all. Previously, He never thought that Yu Qianqiu would have something in his hands that could restrain his devil blade. Now that he had not recovered from his serious injuries, it was even more impossible for him to be his opponent. If he was accidentally caught by Yu Qianqiu again, Yu Qianqiu would definitely not allow him to escape easily. It might be the time of his death. After several failures, Yan Juexing dared not take risks easily anymore. He could already imagine where he might go. With Yu Qianqiu's monstrous power, he might have already sent people to wait for him. Once Yu Qianqiu discovered Shao Chun, Yu Qianqiu would definitely rush over to kill him. From the looks of it, Shao Chun knew that Yu Qianqiu was determined to kill him. For a moment, he realized that he couldn't find a place in the entire world where he could hide and recuperate. He couldn't help but feel extremely miserable. He realized that he was indeed no different from a stray dog. He was a stray dog that everyone wanted to beat up. However, heaven never bars one's way. He inadvertently thought of the literati of Baiwan country, who he had sex with in the past. At that time, because of a moment of tenderness for the literati, he controlled the cultivators of the imperial palace of Baiwan country to protect her before he left. Even the emperor of Baiwan country was under his control. At that time, it was mainly because he was afraid that if something happened to him, no one would take care of the literati that he had tenderness for, so he didn't expose those people under his control. Thinking of this, he suddenly felt a glimmer of hope. If he trespassed into another country's palace, he might be discovered by the hidden cultivators protecting him. It was not a good idea to take risks in the current situation, but it was different in Baiwan country's palace. Most importantly, there were countless palace maids in the palace. With his control over Baiwan country's palace, he could find some palace maids to restore his body and cultivation. As long as the people in the palace didn't leak it, who would find out? Therefore, this scene happened. Yan Juexing looked at the child in surprise. He heard the child calling his mother from outside. He looked around and saw no other woman except for the young woman in front of him. Could it be that the literati was the child's mother, and the literati was already married? But he felt that it was not right. Without his permission, how could the emperor of Baiwan country let the literati marry someone else? Even if she was married, according to the rules of Baiwan country, how could the palace master still live in the palace? Moreover, there were no signs of other men in the room. Guards! Guards! The literati shouted a few more times, but there was still no movement around. Looking at the cold and unfamiliar man in front of her, she couldn't help but panic. The palace maids and guards outside were all absolutely loyal people that man had left for her. Apart from her, even her brother, the emperor, couldn't order them around. Now that there was no movement, the situation could be imagined. The literati immediately pulled her son behind her to protect him. She looked at the man in horror and asked, "Who are you? Why did you trespass here?" Chapter 968. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juexing sneered. A mass of black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juexing. Hipster's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and suddenly understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. It turned out that he had returned. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juexing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world."
Tell me.
"What is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief, with a questioning look. Tears gushed out of Wenqing's eyes. She bit her lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child, who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily, and said with a choked voice, "Yun, he is the father that you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He is a bad person. My mother said that my father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father." The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He choked and said, "Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all.
He said he wanted to throw me to death.
He is a bad person." The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky in his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Juexing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly and hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, this infamous demon in the cultivation world was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Wenqing and wanted to say something but stopped.
He didn't know what to say.
Wenqing comforted the child in her arms with tears in her eyes. She looked at Yan Juexing and complained, "Don't you have anything good to coax him? Something good?" "Yes." Yan Juexing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had on him to please his son was the demonic blade. The sharp curved blade was shining with a blue light with red shadows. It emitted a beautiful and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Wenqing's shoulder. Little Yan only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately looked up and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips.
He was attracted on the spot.
Although Wenqing wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Juexing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, "Is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him?" Yan Juexing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people." Little Yan Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face hadn't dried yet, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it could fly. Yan Juexing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yan Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yan Yun, even Wenqing was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes lit up. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yan Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under Wenqing's guidance, Yan Juexing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of shyness, Wenqing asked with concern, "Why do you look so pale?" Yan Juexing shook his head and said, "You've suffered all these years." These words made Wenqing cry again. He choked and said, "It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future." No one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Juexing tilted his head to look at little Yan Yun, who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and comforted Wenqing in his arms. Then, he said something to Wenqing's ear and suddenly carried Wenqing horizontally. He walked towards the bed inside, causing Wenqing to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were covered by a soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Juexing did his best to serve Wenqing. Somewhat like making up for it after the deed, the two of them hugged each other. Their hearts were connected, and they talked about everything. Yan Juexing told Wenqing about his background in detail, as well as what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Wenqing was just a mortal. This was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had tried to kill Yan Juexing time and time again. Chapter 969. Princess Wenqing, you are indeed a forgetful person. Yan Juexing sneered. A massive black murderous aura came out from his body and wrapped around his whole body. When the black murderous aura was sucked back into his body, his original appearance was revealed. However, his face was still pale, which was the result of his serious injuries. Yan Juexing. Wenqing's voice was trembling. She looked outside the palace and immediately understood everything. No wonder there was no response from the people outside. He was back. In an instant, tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes and slid down her cheeks. The child who popped his head out from behind her saw Yan Juexing's body emitting black smoke and shrank back in fear. However, when he saw his mother choking and crying, he came out like a little adult. He crossed his arms in front of him and said in a childish voice, "Don't hurt my mother." However, it was obvious that the little adult was shivering. He had never seen someone who could change his appearance. Obviously, he was still afraid. However, in order to protect his mother, he still stood out resolutely. "She is your mother?" Yan Juexing snorted. He grabbed the child's clothes and brought him in front of him. He said indifferently, "Who is your father? If you don't tell me, I will throw you to death." Someone actually touched his woman. It was easy to imagine his mood. The child immediately waved his fists and kicked his legs. He shouted in the air, "Bold slave, let me go. My father is the most powerful person in the world. If my father comes and sees you bullying my mother and me, he will not forgive you." Yan Juexing was slightly stunned. The most powerful person in the world couldn't be Yu Qianqiu, right? He thought it was ridiculous. He immediately snorted, "Then I would like to see your most powerful father in the world. Tell me, what is your father's name? Where is he?" As he said, he raised the child over his head and was about to throw him. "Bold slave, my father is Yan Juexing. Let me go, or my father will not forgive you." The child was still struggling stubbornly. However, the name he said stunned Yan Juexing. After a shiver, he slowly turned around and looked at Wenqing in disbelief, with a questioning look. Hipster burst into tears and nodded to Yan Juexing with misty eyes. He bit his lips and nodded to Yan Juexing, indicating that he was his son. Yan Juexing was stunned on the spot. Hipster walked up to him and easily took the child from his arms. She comforted the child, who was glaring at Yan Juexing angrily, and said with a choked voice, "Yan, he is the father you miss every day. Mother lied to me. He was a bad person. Mother said that father loves me the most. This person bullied me. He is not my father. The child pointed at Yan Juexing's nose and said. Yan Juexing swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked with a trembling voice, "You said he's my son?" He couldn't believe that he actually had a son after just one night with a hipster. Hipster nodded again and said with tears in her eyes, "Not long after you left, I found out that I was pregnant. I was full of joy and looked forward to giving you a surprise when you came back. But I waited and waited, and you never came back. After I gave birth to Yun, for 10 months, I still looked forward to your return every day. But you have been gone for 6 years. Yun is already 5 years old. Why are you so cruel? You always come quietly and leave quietly. Why don't you care about my feelings? Do you know how embarrassing it is for a girl like me to get pregnant out of wedlock? I almost didn't dare to take a step out of Wenqing Palace all these years. Have you ever thought about how painful it was for me? Have you always treated me as your plaything? You come when you want and leave when you're tired of playing with me? You don't even bother to say hello. Am I so unbearable in your eyes? If that is the case, then please leave. Don't torture me over and over again." "Mother, don't cry." The child helped Hipster wipe her tears in her arms. Then he shouted at Yan Juexing, "Bad person, get lost, or I will get someone to beat you out." Yan Juexing stood there motionlessly, looking at the mother and son. He had mixed feelings for a moment. He thought that he would be beaten up like a homeless dog. He never thought that his impulsive action back then would give him a home here and a son. If he had really died in the hands of Yu Qianzhou, then he would still have his flesh and blood here. The monotonous expression on Yan Juexing's face changed greatly. He walked over excitedly and opened his arms to embrace the mother and son. He buried his head in Hippie's ear and murmured, "I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Please forgive me. I won't come and go silently in the future."
Don't worry.
"Don't worry. I'll never come and go silently again." "What is Yun's full name?" Hippopotamus whimpered incessantly. After a long while, he choked with sobs and said, "Yan Yun, a homonym for passing clouds and smoke. I thought you thought of me as a passing cloud and would never return, so I gave him this name." "Yan Yun?" Yan Juexing pondered for a moment and nodded. "A swan's ambition can reach the clouds."
Good name.
Not bad, not bad. His son was naturally good. Yan Yun was a smart child. Although he didn't quite understand what Yan Juexing and Hipster were talking about, he figured out that the stranger who said he would kill him was really his father. Instantly, he burst into tears. Yan Yun was a smart child. Yan Yun didn't understand what Yan Juexing and Hipster were talking about. He bawled loudly, and he was extremely heartbroken. His crying made Hipster unable to cry anymore. She pushed Yan Juexing away and asked the child, "Yun, what's wrong?" Yan Juexing was flustered. He looked at the child helplessly and said nervously, Did I not know how to control my strength and hurt him?" Yan Yun turned his head and buried it in his mother's embrace. He choked and said, "Mother lied to me. You lied to me. Father doesn't love me at all. He said he wanted to kill me. He is a bad person." The more he cried, the sadder he became. It was as though the sky and his heart had collapsed. He was too disappointed. Yan Juexing was dumbfounded. He wanted to slap himself. Why didn't he ask clearly? Why did he hit a child the moment he came in? For a moment, the notorious devil in the world of cultivators was so anxious that he didn't know what to do. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. He looked at Hipster and wanted to say something, but then hesitated. He didn't know what to say. Hipster comforted the child in his arms with tears in his eyes. He looked at Yan Juexing with a good mood and complained, "Don't you have anything good to coax him?" "Something good?" "Yes." Yan Juexing suddenly patted his head. The demonic blade flew out and floated in front of him. For him, the only good thing he had was the demonic blade to please a son whom he had just met for the first time. The sharp curved blade was shining with a cold blue light with red shadows. It emitted a magnificent and charming color. The dark blade had a strange demonic pattern that exuded an ancient aura. A unique and nimble crescent moon swayed on Hipster's shoulder. Little Yen Yun only took a peek at it. His eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately raised his head and wiped his tears. He stared at the demonic blade and licked his lips. He was attracted on the spot. Although Hipster wasn't a person in the cultivation world, he could tell that it should be a weapon. He couldn't help but roll his eyes at Yan Juexing. He smiled through his tears and said coquettishly, "Is there such a thing for a child to play with? Aren't you afraid of hurting him?" Yan Juexing saw that his son liked it and had stopped crying. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief. He waved his hand and said, "It's okay. If I don't let it hurt people, it won't hurt people." Little Yen Yun, who was crying so hard just now, immediately forgot what sadness was. After all, he had the temperament of a child. He slid down from his mother's arms. The tears on his face had yet to dry, but he bit a finger. He raised his head and looked at the demonic blade floating in the air. He seemed to be wondering how it flew. Yan Juexing's eyes lit up. He immediately controlled the demonic blade to fly around the house. As expected, it attracted little Yen Yun to clap and cheer. Not to mention little Yen Yun, even Hipster was seeing such a magical thing for the first time. His eyes were full of splendor. He didn't know how the demon god would feel if he knew this scene. The divine weapon he had personally refined had become a toy for a child to play with. Not long after, little Yen Yun completely let go and chased the demonic blade around the house. However, the physical strength of a child was limited. After a long time, he naturally became tired. In the end, he hugged the demonic blade and fell asleep. Under Hipster's guidance, Yan Juexing placed him on a small bed and gently covered him with a blanket. At this moment, the pair of husband and wife looked at each other seriously. After a moment of embarrassment, Hipster asked with concern, "Why is your face so ugly?" Yan Juexing shook his head and said, "You've suffered all these years." These words made Hipster cry again. He choked and said, "It's okay for me to suffer. I'm just afraid that the child will not have a father in the future." With such an appearance, no one would have thought that this was the unruly princess who disguised herself as a man and ran amok in the capital. Yan Juexing tilted his head to look at little Yen Yun, who was sleeping soundly. A trace of fear flashed in his eyes. If he hadn't escaped quickly, he would probably have lost his father. He gently let out a breath and hugged Hipster in his arms to comfort her. Then, he whispered something in Hipster's ear. Suddenly, he carried Hipster in his arms and walked towards the brocade couch, causing Hipster to exclaim shyly. The clothes of the man and woman on the bed fluttered in the wind. Not long after, two naked bodies were entangled together. Waves of panting and moaning were enveloped by the soundproof barrier. This time, Yan Juexing did his best to serve Hipster, somewhat like making up for it after making love. The two of them hugged each other and talked about everything. Yan Juexing told Hipster in detail about his background and what he had experienced all these years. He didn't hide anything, including how he suffered a few losses at the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Hipster was just a mortal. It was the first time she had heard of the exciting and bizarre stories of the cultivation world. She was even more impressed by Yu Qianqiu, who had repeatedly tried to kill Yan Juexing. Chapter 970. On the 22nd floor of the World Chamber of Commerce, Wei Chunqiu left the room he had been guarding and walked slowly to the other side of the passage with a puzzled look. There was no other reason. Yu Qianqiu suddenly brought 5 women here and arranged for them to stay on the 22nd floor. Obviously, they had a special relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, after Yu Qianqiu brought these women here, he ran away. He couldn't find them even if he wanted to solve his doubts. After some deliberation, he decided to personally investigate the matter. He had to figure out what was going on. Since his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, was Yu Qianqiu's woman, then what was going on with these 5 women? Nongzhu had just arranged rooms for the 5 women and went back and forth between the 5 rooms to ask how satisfied they were. As soon as he went out, he saw Wei Chunqiu walking slowly toward him with a gloomy face and 2 big sleeves. Looking at his face, Nongju's heart could not help but pound. There were 25 single rooms on this floor. To avoid him, he had specially arranged these women to stay on this side. There shouldn't be any conflict with him, right? Bat King Wei. Nongju bowed respectfully to Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu looked him up and down and snorted. You're just a gigolo. I can tell at first glance that you're not a good person. He was not polite to Nongju at all and directly scolded him. What did he say? Nongju's face twitched, but she did not dare to refute him. His cultivation was much higher than hers, and she was no match for him if they fought. She could only force a smile. Are these 5 women your people or Yu Qianzhou's people? Wei Chuanqiu twirled his mustache and asked with squinted eyes. His eyes seemed to regard Nongju as a pimp in a brothel. Nongju was also a smart person. Seeing Wei Chuanqiu's attitude, he naturally would not take trouble for himself. He immediately pushed the blame away and said, "They are all sect leader Yu's people." As soon as he said this, Wei Chuanqiu's face suddenly darkened. He stared coldly at Nongju and said in a low voice, "Call them out. I have something to ask them." Nongju felt that something was wrong and said awkwardly, "Bat King, why don't you wait for sect leader Yu to come back and ask him yourself?" Wei Chuanqiu snorted with a threatening tone and stared at Nongju with a fierce look. Nongju felt her scalp go numb and obediently knocked on the door one after another. Not long after, 5 different women came out obediently. They lined up in a row and stood in front of Wei Chuanqiu, trembling with fear. When Nongju called them out, she had already secretly transmitted a message to the 5 of them. This green-winged Bat King was an early-stage immortal emperor expert and had a bad temper. She told everyone to be careful. Wei Chuanqiu's cold gaze swept across the faces of the 5 women. Noticing that all of them were rather good-looking, she snorted coldly and said, "Tell me honestly, what is the relationship between you and Yu Qianzhou?" She then pointed to the first woman standing on the right and said, "We'll start from you. You speak first." At first, Farong was a little flustered because of Nongju's warning. However, she thought that since Yu Qianzhou could bring her here, he would definitely not harm her. Because of her almost blind trust in Yu Qianzhou, Farong became the calmest among the 5 women. She indifferently bowed to Wei Chuanqiu and said, "Farong greets Senior Wei. Yu Qianzhou is my man." Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu's mustache trembled. He stared at the calm Farong for a long time before slowly moving his eyes to the next woman, Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue was a little afraid at first, but after hearing Farong's words, she threw all her fears to the back of her mind. She bit her lips and stared at Farong without moving her eyes. Sure enough, her guess was confirmed. Yu Qianzhou did not only have 1 woman. "Little girl, how dare you not answer this old man's question? Are you tired of living?" Wei Chuanqiu said in a gloomy voice. Yan Yu, who was standing behind Wu Lixue, immediately sent a telepathic message to remind her and secretly pulled Wu Lixue. Wu Lixue's eyes were filled with tears. She replied with an aggrieved expression, "I am Yu Qianzhou's woman." Wei Chuanqiu suddenly sneered. When his eyes moved to Yan Yu slightly bowed and said, "Me too." Nongju, who was standing aside, thought that these were the only 3 women. Because he had investigated Yu Qianzhou's background, he knew that the Temptress of 100 Charms next was the former lover of Yu Qianzhou's master in Kuangsung. The reason why Yu Qianzhou brought her along was that he respected her as his master's wife. However, to his astonishment, the Temptress of 100 Charms followed closely behind Yan Yu and said shamelessly, "Senior, Yu Qianzhou is my man. I am Yu Qianzhou's woman." Hearing this, Wei Chuanqiu and the other women didn't have much reaction. Unexpectedly, Nongju suddenly shouted angrily, "Temptress of 100 Charms, don't make irresponsible remarks. There are deities above us. How dare you be so shameless and talk nonsense? Do you want to die?" No one expected that Nongju would be so angry. They all looked at her in astonishment. The hostility on Wei Chuanqiu's face disappeared. After a while, he pointed at the Temptress of 100 Charms and asked Nongju, "Is there any secret?" Senior, you are wise. Nongzhu made no obeisance and pointed at the temptress of 100 Charms who was biting her lips angrily. She said, "This woman is the woman of Yu Qianzhou's former master. To be exact, she should be the wife of Yu Qianzhou's master. It's one thing for her to be shameless, but how dare she ruin Yu Qianzhou's reputation as well? Master's wife." The other women, including Wei Chuanqiu, exclaimed together. Ferong, Wu Lixue, Yan Yu and Zi all looked at the temptress of 100 Charms in disbelief. Even Yan Yu, who had spent the longest time with the temptress of 100 Charms, did not know that the temptress of 100 Charms was Yu Qianzhou's master's wife. If she had known, she would not have encouraged the temptress of 100 Charms to threaten Yu Qianzhou in the purple bamboo forest in the South China Sea, because it was against human nature. No matter how open-minded Yan Yu was, it was still a little difficult for her to get through this. The seductive look on the temptress of 100 Charms' face was completely gone. Her smooth cheeks turned pale, and blood appeared on her tightly bitten lips. Obviously, she had bitten her lips. She slowly raised her head and looked at Nongzhu firmly. She said, "Yu Qianzhou is my man. I am Yu Qianzhou's woman."
Bitch.
How dare you talk nonsense? Nongzhu flew into a rage and slapped the temptress of 100 Charms' face.
Pa.
The slap made the temptress of 100 Charms fall to the ground. Although the slap was not lethal, Wei Chuanqiu was inexplicably frightened. She looked at Nongzhu speechlessly and found that the toy boy was really cruel. He did not show any mercy when hitting a woman. Yu Qianzhou's master's wife said that she was Yu Qianzhou's woman. The other women were also shocked. They did not expect that such a thing would happen. They did not know what to do for a moment. The temptress of 100 Charms, who was lying on her side on the ground, coughed slightly. Immediately, a pool of blood came out of her mouth and fell on the white floor. It could be seen that Nongzhu's slap was not light. The temptress of 100 Charms lay on her side on the ground. She looked at the blood flowing from the corner of her mouth and remained motionless.
He could not stand it anymore.
She looked at her master resentfully and squatted down to help the temptress of 100 Charms. Yan Yu also came to herself and followed Zi to help the temptress of 100 Charms. Stop. Don't blame me for being rude to anyone who dares to help her. Nongzhu pointed at Zi and Yan Yu angrily. The two women looked at each other and squatted down. They did not know whether to help the temptress of 100 Charms or not. Zi thought for a while and immediately showed the most lethal look to her master. She begged, "Master?" However, this time, Nongzhu directly ignored her. She pointed at Zi and shouted, "Shut up." Zi did not dare to speak at once. "I am an upright person. I don't need anyone's pity." The temptress of 100 Charms sat up. She pushed Zi and Yan Yu's hands away and stood up stubbornly. With blood at the corner of her mouth, she looked at Nongzhu and said, "What did I do wrong? Why did you hit me?"
Slap.
Nongzhu slapped the temptress of 100 Charms again and shouted angrily, "Shameless bitch. How dare you talk back to me?" This time, the strength of the slap was obviously stronger. The temptress of 100 Charms' hair was messed up. She fell to the ground with blood flowing from the corner of her mouth. Wei Chuanqiu, who originally wanted to come over and denounce Nongzhu, was dumbfounded and stood aside obediently. It seemed that he wanted to show that this matter had nothing to do with him. He looked at Nongzhu with a strange look as if he was saying, "Brother, you are so cruel. Are you sure that this woman has nothing to do with Yu Qianzhou? Be careful that Yu Qianzhou comes back to get even with you." The temptress of 100 Charms only lay on the ground for a while. Then she stood up stubbornly again. She tore a piece of cloth from her sleeve and tied her messy hair behind her head. The blood at the corner of her mouth and her red and swollen cheeks could not hide the firmness in her eyes. The firmness that she would never regret. "Senior Wei, is there anything else? If not, I will go back to my room to have a rest." The temptress of 100 Charms directly passed Nongzhu and said to Wei Chuanqiu, as if Nongzhu had never hit her. Wei Chunqiu looked at Nongzhu and then at the temptress of 100 charms. He didn't know what to say. In fact, he was the culprit. If he hadn't come here to interrogate Nongzhu, such a thing would not have happened. You are really a shameless bitch. I will kill you today in case you become a laughingstock. Nongzhu snorted coldly. She moved as fast as lightning and directly grabbed the neck of the temptress of 100 charms. With the cultivation of the temptress of 100 charms, how could she escape from Nongzhu? At this critical moment, Wei Chunqiu suddenly moved and clamped Nongzhu's arm. He looked at Nongzhu helplessly and said, "What are you doing? I haven't finished my question and you want to kill me? You're looking down on me." He waved his hand and Nongzhu immediately retreated far away. "Girl, this gigolo said that you are Yu Qianqiu's wife, and you said that you are Yu Qianqiu's woman. What is going on? Why can't I do it?" Wei Chunqiu frowned and said, one of the reasons why he saved the temptress of 100 charms was that he was curious. The most important thing was that he didn't know what Yu Qianqiu's attitude was. If he accidentally killed Yu Qianqiu's sweetheart because of him, who knew what crazy things that bad guy would do? Chapter 971. Wei Chunqiu had interacted with Yu Qianqiu for a long time. After interacting with him for such a long time, he could tell that Yu Qianqiu was vicious and merciless. He could also do shameless flattery. However, no matter how much he changed, he could not change the insanity in his bones. It was like a kind of madness against the oppression of fate. Whoever touched his things would be oppressed and attacked by him. He had to resist fiercely. Wei Chunqiu did not dare to go too far when his inner elixir was in Yu Qianqiu's hand. That was why he saved the enchantress from Nongzhu. There was a man who gave me up. We had no relationship. Later, that man took a disciple and died soon after. In order to avenge that man, I got to know his disciple. Maybe I fell in love with him after a long time. I don't deny that I fell in love with his disciple. It's that simple. The enchantress smiled faintly with blood on the corner of her mouth. No one knew whether she was laughing at Wei Chunqiu or herself. She just looked at Nongzhu, who was pushed back by Wei Chunqiu, and said, "I don't understand why I have to be the woman of an irresponsible man who abandoned me and died a long time ago. I'm not a woman who likes the new and gets tired of the old. I've done a lot for that man and almost destroyed my whole sect. Of course, this is the reason I found to comfort myself later. After I fell in love with Yu Qianqiu, I was also very conflicted. But why did he make me his wife? Now I just want to be his woman." Then she looked around and said, "I know what I did was wrong, but I don't know what I did wrong. Who can tell me a reason to persuade me so that I won't continue to do wrong?" Farong and the other girls looked at each other. Anyway, in their understanding, it must be wrong. There was no need for any reason. Anyway, it was wrong. This kind of thing should not happen. However, these girls sympathized with her now, so no one could say anything. Well, Wei Chunqiu scratched his head and looked at Nongzhu. He immediately waved to him and said, "Toy boy, come here and tell her what she did wrong." Nongzhu walked over slowly and snorted. "Bitch. The reason is very simple. I've already said that what you're doing is against common sense." "Yes." Wei Chunqiu nodded and said, "Doing so is against common sense. Little girl, let go. Don't be stubborn anymore. If you continue like this, the world will not tolerate you. In the end, you'll only be the one getting hurt, and you might even drag Yu Qianqiu down with you. Besides, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a good person. Why did he have to like him? And you guys?" Wei Chunqiu then pointed at the rest of the girls and glared at them. "I say, you can like anyone, but why do you all want to board Yu Qianqiu's pirate ship? Is that broken ship that attractive to you? I think all of you should disperse. Disperse, disperse. Everyone go home." He had a good idea. He was going to disband all the women of Yu Qianqiu and let his adopted daughter, Bai Suzhen, be the only one. Otherwise, he would not feel good if Bai Suzhen shared a man with other women. However, Zi curled her lips and said, "I won't go. I'm not his woman. I'm just his friend." She thought, "I want to board the pirate ship, but the pirate ship is so sneaky that it doesn't give me a chance to do so. Of course, she could only think about it in her heart. She couldn't say it out loud, or she would die of shame. She didn't have the courage of the enchantress. To be honest, she quite admired the enchantress. Nongju glanced at Ze and twitched his mouth. No one knew his daughter better than him. He probably guessed what his daughter was thinking. Against common sense? The enchantress suddenly giggled and asked, "Mr. Nongju, how am I against common sense? Is it because I dated his master?"
Yes.
Nongju suddenly turned around and shouted, "Bitch! The world is so big. I don't care who you find, but not you Qianqiu. Mr. Nongju, you can't convince me with this reason." The enchantress shook her head stubbornly. Nongju immediately shouted, "Then I'll kill you and end all troubles." "Mr. Nongju, you don't have to do it. If Yu Qianqiu wants me dead, he only needs to say one word, and I'll die in front of him immediately." The enchantress smiled faintly. She had long thought that there would be resistance when she was with Yu Qianqiu, but she just thought it was because of the common people's opinions and filthy words. However, she didn't care about those things at all. Since she could be called the enchantress of 100 charms by others, what kind of ugly words had she not heard before? However, she didn't expect that there would be resistance from Yu Qianqiu, which was so strong that it hurt her both physically and mentally. Nongju suddenly squinted her eyes and asked word by word, "Did you two do something out of line?" "No, it's just my wishful thinking," the enchantress said fearlessly. The others looked at them in silence, especially Wei Chuanqiu. He couldn't figure out why this gigolo cared so much about this matter. It seemed that he cared about it very much, and his attitude was quite extreme. "Enchantress, since you and I are from the same place, I'll give you a choice." Nongju waved her hand and pointed outside. "You can either leave the World Chamber of Commerce and go wherever you want, or you can die in my hands. It's up to you. My patience is limited. You'd better make a decision quickly." "I won't go anywhere. I'll wait here for you Qianqiu to come back. I'll only listen to him, and I won't listen to anyone else." The enchantress slowly turned around and walked straight to her room, as if she didn't care about Nongju's threat at all.
"Bitch!
"I think you're tired of living," Nongju shouted angrily and dashed forward. However, a green shadow flashed by and was caught by Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu grabbed her with one hand and scratched his head with the other. "Let's wait for you Qianqiu to come back. What do you want to say when I come back?" The door in front of them opened and Yu Qianqiu walked out. He was stunned when he saw them in the corridor. Then he strode over and asked suspiciously, "What are you doing?" Nongju pointed at the enchantress and shouted angrily, "Ask her." Yu Qianqiu looked over and saw the enchantress standing at the door, motionless with her back facing the outside. Her messy hair was tied up casually with a rag, and her clothes were a little messy. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help frowning and asked, "What's wrong with you?" The enchantress didn't want Yu Qianqiu to see her embarrassed appearance. However, after hesitating for a while, she knew that she couldn't avoid what she had to face. So, she slowly turned around and said as if nothing had happened, "Nothing." However, the two palm marks on her face and the blood at the corner of her mouth made Yu Qianqiu squint and ask coldly, "Who did this?" The enchantress shook her head to show that she was fine and hoped to make peace. However, Nongju flashed over, pointed at her and scolded, "This bitch is shameless. How dare she say that she is your woman? I think it's better to drive her out as soon as possible so that she won't be hated by everyone." Hearing this, the enchantress immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu. The others also looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to know his reaction. Yu Qianqiu looked at Nongju expressionlessly and asked, "Did you hit her?" "I taught her a lesson for you. If Bat King Wei didn't stop me, I would have killed her." Nongju was still angry and said. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed unpredictably. Huiming was dark and gloomy for a while before he sighed and said, "We are all on the same side. What can we talk about? Why did you hit her?" "What?" "She said that you are her man. Shouldn't I teach her a lesson?" Nongju said harshly. "Are you out of your mind? It's against common sense." Your reputation will be ruined if it is spread out. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and shook his head. He sighed slowly and said, "Anyway, you shouldn't have hit her." The enchantress, who had always been seductive and confident, quietly turned her head to one side after hearing this. In fact, there were tears in her eyes. She really didn't ask for much. "From what you said, is there really something going on between you two?" Nomju said aggressively. "Is it really, as she said, that you are her man and she is your woman? Have you already done something out of line?" "Nothing happened between us." Yu Qianqiu stared at Nongju fiercely and said, "But I won't allow anyone to hurt her, especially her. You'd better control your emotions. It's none of your business and it won't affect you. I don't want to see you do anything to her. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude." He clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Obviously, he was trying hard to control himself. Humph. Looks like I was the one who meddled in other people's business. Nongju was so angry that she laughed and said, "I only ask you one question. Tell me honestly, is she your woman?" Everyone's gaze was focused on Yu Qianqiu, waiting to see what he would say. Yu Qianqiu's Adam's apple moved, and his mouth was dry. He turned his head to look at the enchantress, who was also looking at him, and said word by word, "She is not my woman." Then he suddenly looked at Nongju and said, "Are you satisfied now?" Some things were just too powerful. Even if Yu Qianqiu was extremely daring, he still didn't dare to rashly cross them. The enchantress's body stiffened. She bit her lips hard, and fresh blood came out from the corner of her mouth. Ever since she made up her mind in the bamboo house, she knew what kind of price she would have to pay. Perhaps it would be a heavy price that she could not bear. Even though she was mentally prepared, she still felt a heart-wrenching pain in her chest when she heard Yu Qianqiu's words. Nongju glanced at them and sneered, "Yu Qianqiu, you should have a bottom line. Some things should never be crossed. Otherwise, you will be infamous for thousands of years. That's all I have to say. I hope you remember what you said just now." After saying that, she walked straight to the corridor and disappeared at the top of the stairs, leaving a cold snort. Wei Chuanqiu coughed twice and said nothing. As the culprit, he also quietly floated back to where he was supposed to be. Yu Qianqiu only felt that his chest was as heavy as lead, and it was hard for him to breathe. He looked at the enchantress and asked, "Are you all right?" The enchantress forced a smile and shook her head. Her strong confidence in facing men was nowhere to be seen. Biting her lips, she opened the door of the room and quickly closed the door after entering. Yu Qianqiu heaved a heavy sigh and said to Yanyu, "Go and accompany her." Yanyu nodded and quickly entered the room of the enchantress. Chapter 972. Farong, Wu Lixue, and Ziyi stood quietly at the side. What happened just now was really emotional for the three of them. From what the three of them knew, the Allure Beauty's actions were wrong. However, the three of them inexplicably felt that Yu Qianqiu's words, "She's not my woman," were too cruel to the Allure Beauty. The three of them stared at the silent Yu Qianqiu, but their ears were paying attention to the movements in the temptress's room. However, they couldn't hear a sound at all. Obviously, she had set up a soundproof enchantment. The three of them were all women, so they could imagine how sad the temptress must be at this time. Maybe she was crying heartbreakingly. Originally, Wu Lixue was the one who was the most troubled and couldn't understand this matter. It was hard for her to accept the fact that so many women ran out of Yu Qianqiu for no reason. However, after witnessing all this, she realized that she was lucky. Moreover, in this world, it was very common for men to have 3 or 4 wives. She even sympathized with the temptress. She couldn't imagine what she would be like if one day Yu Qianqiu said that she wasn't his woman. She was afraid that she would collapse. The other women's thoughts were similar to her. Farong gently walked to Yu Qianqiu's side, held his arm, and said softly, "Go in and see her." However, Yu Qianqiu didn't answer the question and smiled bitterly. "I quite admire Yanggua now, or should I say admire Master Jean." Yanggua? Master Jean? The women were suddenly confused. They had never heard of these two names, but they were guessing which two masters in the immortal world were. Z even asked foolishly, I heard from my master that the immortal emperor in the immortal world is called Jin Tai. Is the master Jin you mentioned him? Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes and ignored her. How could he tell them the story of the master and disciple's incestuous relationship? If he told them, wouldn't it make them think of his inner thoughts? He patted the back of Furong's hand and said, she needs your tolerance more. Otherwise, she will feel even worse if she stays with you every day.
Can you understand me?
I understand. Furong nodded and let go of his hand. She walked straight to the door of the Enchantress of 100 Charms and pushed the door open after seeing her off. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned to look at Wu Lixue and asked, will you hate me? He was worried that Wu Lixue wouldn't be able to accept the fact that he had too many women. A trace of grievance flashed across Wu Lixue's face, but he still shook his head. He walked to Yu Qianqiu's side and said in a low voice, can you help me save little Phoenix sister? When Yu Qianqiu heard that, he suddenly felt a headache coming on. Although she was shaking her head to show that she wouldn't, it felt like she was saying, if you can't save Sister Phoenix, I won't forgive you. But how was he supposed to save a crow that had been dead for so long? If he was seriously injured, he could still think of a way, but in fact, he was already dead. However, he couldn't refuse her. Seeing that he was speechless, Wu Lixue thought that he had agreed. She immediately took out the dead crow from her storage pouch and brought it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He didn't know whether to take it or not, and his expression kept twitching. He now deeply understood that it wasn't a good thing to have too many women. Troublesome matters came one after another, and he still missed his single life. Isn't this the crow? Zi curiously stretched her head over and grabbed the crow in Wu Lixue's hand. After confirming that it was indeed dead, she immediately avoided it with a contemptuous and directly stuffed it into Yu Qianqiu's arms. Looking at Wu Lixue, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you sure? How can something that's already dead be saved? As she said that, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and suddenly realized, I know, you're deliberately making things difficult for him.
And
that's how it should be. She seemed to be taking pleasure in other people's misfortune. It's not a crow, it's a phoenix. Before it died, it said that Yu Qianqiu had a way to save it. When Wu Lixue remembered that the crow had been killed to save her, a look of sorrow immediately appeared on her face. Zi looked at the crow in Yu Qianqiu's hand in disbelief. You said that it can speak. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Zi, signaling her to shut up. Holding the crow's leg, he asked suspiciously, did it really say that I could save it? When he remembered that this crow was the famous phoenix from his previous life, he started to believe it a little. If the #1 divine bird in the world could be killed so easily, then it wouldn't be called a divine bird. Even he didn't believe it. Wu Lixue nodded with certainty. Before little sister Phoenix died, she desperately told me to find a way to find you. She said that you could save it. I can save it? Yu Qianqiu held the crow's leg in one hand and swayed it in front of him. He rubbed his chin and muttered. After thinking for a while, he raised his eyebrows and said, let's go and give it a try. After saying that, he walked towards a room with the crow's leg. Wu Lixue followed closely behind him. Zi naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity to watch the show. She followed behind the two of them happily. In the room, the crow's corpse was thrown on a table. Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and walked around the table twice. Zi also followed behind him like a con man. Wu Lixue looked at Yu Qianqiu expectantly. Could it be that it's not completely dead? Yu Qianqiu suddenly stopped and subconsciously asked Zi, who was behind him. Zi looked at him as if she was looking at an idiot. She seemed to be saying, it's already dead, and you still say that it's not completely dead? Forget it. It's useless to tell you. You don't understand modern medicine, Yu Qianqiu said. Then, he turned the dead crow over so that its belly was facing the sky. He pressed 2 fingers on the crow's chest and kept pressing. The two girls looked at each other. Zi suddenly asked Wu Lixue, Your little sister Phoenix is a female? Wu Lixue nodded. Z immediately looked at Yu Qianqiu with disgust and said with disdain, "It seems that not only are you a big liar, you're also a big pervert. You even took advantage of a female crow. Damn it. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand," Yu Qianqiu said with disdain. After pressing the crow's nipples for a while, he bent over and opened the crow's mouth. He blew hard into the crow's mouth. This idiot was doing artificial respiration like in his previous life. How could he think of this? Zi and Wu Lixue looked at him curiously with their mouths open. They had never seen such a treatment method before. They were quite doubtful whether it would work. However, the result was just as the two girls expected. After a while, Yu Qianqiu realized that the crow was still dead. He finally gave up and stood at the side, shaking his head and sighing. Wu Lixue leaned over and said with a sad face, "Yu Qianqiu, you must think of a way to save my little sister Phoenix." "I really can't think of any way to save it, but there's a way that we can try. I'm just afraid that if we fail, your little sister Phoenix's corpse won't even be found. I'm afraid that you'll blame me then," Yu Qianqiu said with a toothache.
What is it?
Wu Lixue asked worriedly. Yu Qianqiu frowned and said, "Do you still remember the phoenix's nirvana that I told you about at your house? Legend has it that the phoenix is an immortal bird. Every time it dies, it can be reborn. I just don't know if it's true or not. But didn't the crow say that it can be reborn after going through a tribulation? I think it should be true, but I'm still a little worried. If it can't be reborn after going through the tribulation, even if it doesn't turn into ashes, it will become a roasted crow.
Ah.
You can burn it back to life with fire? Is that true? Is this crow so magical? It's not a crow, but a phoenix?" Z looked as if she had heard a ridiculous story. She couldn't help but reach out to fiddle with the dead crow on the table. Wu Lixue frowned slightly. She remembered that the crow seemed to have said something about rebirth. She intertwined her fingers together and asked, "Should we try?" Yu Qianqiu immediately shook his head and said, "It's yours, and you have to decide. What if you burn it down? Wouldn't that make you sad? That's the reason why I haven't done anything yet. I'll listen to you." Since we can't think of any other way, just let him burn it," Zi persuaded Wu Lixue energetically. After all, it wasn't hers, so she was very decisive. Wu Lixue hesitated for a moment, then nodded weakly at Yu Qianqiu, agreeing. In any case, no matter if it was a crow or a phoenix, Yu Qianqiu didn't have a good impression of these dead birds that still tormented people. If they were burned down, so be it. After getting Wu Lixue's agreement, he didn't say anything else and directly grabbed the crow in his palm. A ball of red flames instantly surged out, enveloping the crow and burning it. As soon as the flames appeared, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. He immediately felt that the dead crow's body was rapidly absorbing the heat from the flames. Wu Lixue and Zi looked at each other. They both saw the clues. A normal bird's feather would most likely turn into ashes upon contact with a raging fire. However, this crow's feather was not damaged at all in the raging fire. This was clearly illogical. Wu Lixue's eyes immediately lit up, feeling a glimmer of hope. TSK. There really is a way. Yu Qianqiu was amazed. He guessed that there really was such a thing as a phoenix undergoing nirvana. The heat released by the ordinary flames in his palm was actually not enough for the bird to absorb. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand towards the window, and a gust of wind swept out. The curtains on the window immediately rolled down, and the red flames immediately shone in the room. Just as the curtains were rolled down, the red flames retracted, and the green flames continued to burn the motionless crow in his palm. After the time it took to eat a meal, the crow still did not move. Yu Qianqiu simply couldn't believe it. Even with the huge amount of heat contained in the green flames, there was still no reaction from the crow. He really didn't know how long it would take for it to absorb. Then, let's try the purple flames. Yu Qianqiu's eyebrows twitched, and the green flames retracted, while the purple flames rose up and enveloped the crow. The beautiful scene of the three colored flames immediately caused Zi and Wu Lishue's hearts to flutter. And after the purple flames appeared, in just a few breaths' time, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that the crow in his palm seemed to have a reaction. Chapter 973. In just a short while, the majestic and powerful energy of the purple flames seemed to have saturated the crow's body, and the speed at which the crow was absorbing the energy was gradually slowing down. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The power of the purple flames was indeed far greater than the blue flames, and if he used the blue flames to supply the crow to absorb, he was afraid that it would not be satisfied in a short period of time. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu began to ponder. He reckoned that the legendary phoenix's nirvana was actually the dead phoenix absorbing the energy within the flames, and when the energy was saturated, it should be able to be reborn. It was probably similar to charging the phoenix, and thinking about it, using fire to burn the phoenix was most likely the same. It really was an advanced divine bird, and had already reached the level of high technology in his previous world. At this moment, Wu Lixue and Zi both let out a surprised sound. They saw that the sleeping crow in Yu Qianqiu's palm had begun to emit a faint rainbow halo, flickering in and out of existence, and in an instant it was beautiful. Following that, a refreshing fragrance wafted over, and the flickering rainbow halo no longer flickered, but gradually condensed into a lingering rainbow cloud that circled around the sleeping crow in Yu Qianqiu's palm. The rainbow cloud's orbit was like a moving nebula in the universe, and it was mesmerizing, causing the three of them to feel relaxed and happy. As for the sleeping crow in the purple flames, it was as if it was sleeping sweetly in an ancient nebula. Its originally stiff legs were now gently retracting under its abdomen, and its stiff head had also returned to its shoulder feathers. Unknowingly, it had gone from lying on its side to nesting in Yu Qianqiu's palm, like a tired bird returning to its nest, sleeping under the starry sky, its demeanor unusually peaceful. Just as the fragrance was getting stronger and stronger, the heartwarming fragrance was suddenly sucked away from their nostrils. The three of them subconsciously stretched out their heads to chase after it and took a deep breath. However, the fragrance was so resolute that it did not leave even the slightest trace behind. The air in front of them instantly became light and tasteless, completely returning to normal. The seven-colored cloud that had gradually spread out to cover half of the space in the room was also gradually shrinking. In the end, it was the size of a dinosaur egg, forming a seven-colored eggshell. The gorgeous flowing light was so beautiful that people didn't dare to breathe. After the rainbow-colored eggshell was formed, it completely blocked the vision of the three of them, and they could no longer see the sleeping crow inside. At the same time, the rainbow-colored eggshell also completely blocked the absorption of the purple flames. Yu Qianqiu let out a sigh of relief, feeling that his mission should be completed, and he quickly retracted the purple flames back into his body. In an instant, the purple light in the room disappeared, and Yu Qianqiu held the rainbow-colored eggshell with one hand, illuminating the entire room in a strange and dazzling light, as if they were in a dream. Wu Lixue and Zi were even more dumbfounded, their mouths wide open as they looked left and right. So beautiful, so beautiful. Just as the three of them were immersed in this dream, the light in the room suddenly changed, and they could only see the rainbow-colored light on the eggshell moving quickly, suddenly colliding with each other and exploding with a dazzling light, so bright that the three of them closed their eyes, not daring to look straight at it. But in the instant that the three of them closed their eyes, the dazzling light suddenly retracted, and the three of them immediately felt the room turn dark. Kung kung! A loud cry reverberated in the room, causing the three of them to open their eyes at the same time, only to see a strange-looking bird standing on Yu Qianqiu's palm. To be exact, it should be a chicken with a chicken head, a chicken tail, and a chicken body. The only difference was that there were three rainbow-colored feathers on its head, and the color of its body was yellow and gray. Calling it a chicken didn't seem like it. Pheasant! Yu Qianqiu cried out involuntarily, and then he was dumbfounded. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because he often roasted pheasants, and in the end, turned the crow into the appearance of a pheasant. That would be a sin, but he didn't seem to have thought about roasting a pheasant just now, right? Pheasant. After being reminded by Yu Qianqiu, Wu Lixue and Zi also cried out involuntarily. If this wasn't a pheasant, then what was it? Both of them had seen pheasants before, especially Zi. In order to practice the fowl show, she asked Nongzhu to catch many pheasants for her to observe. Although most of them were eaten by Nongzhu in the end, it didn't stop her from recognizing pheasants. Just as the pheasant let out a loud kang-kang sound, Wei Chunqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly trembled. He suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the other side of the corridor. Yun Peng, who was standing on the rooftop, also trembled and quickly disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he appeared beside Wei Chunqiu and said with a serious expression, "Did you hear what just now?" Wei Chunqiu slowly stood up and looked at Yun Peng. Yun Peng had heard from outside, so he naturally heard it even more clearly from here. This sound wasn't loud, but when it entered their ears, it actually made their bodies weak and made them want to worship it. This was the first time they had such a feeling, and it was really too strange. It seems to be the cry of something? Wei Chunqiu looked at Yun Peng in bewilderment. She asked herself in her heart, what kind of cry could make her heart tremble? What kind of cry? Yun Peng's white sword-like eyebrows knitted together, and he slowly muttered to himself, what kind of thing can make the cry of gold and jade? Many years ago, I heard from my late father that in ancient times there was a divine beast phoenix that descended from the god realm to the immortal realm. The cry it made was like the resonance of gold and jade, sonorous and mellow. Could it be the cry of a phoenix? Phoenix? Are you kidding me? There must be something wrong with your brain. The divine beast phoenix is a supreme imperial family with the noblest bloodline among us birds. It doesn't drink unless it's morning dew, it doesn't eat unless it's tender bamboo, and it doesn't rest unless it's 1,000-year-old Chinese parasol tree. Wei Chunqiu looked like she had heard the funniest joke. She pointed around and said, "You can't be saying that a phoenix would run to the World Chamber of Commerce founded by Yu Qianqiu, right? Then isn't this phoenix a bit too blind? It really doesn't live up to its title of phoenix." "I'm just saying." Yun Peng changed his mind and said, "But this cry is indeed a bit strange. It's a phoenix, I'll chop off its head and give it to you." Wei Chunqiu snorted and looked to the other side, saying, "It must be Yu Qianqiu doing something again. Let's go take a look." The two of them then dashed over in a flash inside the room. The pheasant standing on Yu Qianqiu's palm suddenly opened its eyes. A 7-colored glow flashed in its sharp eyes, and it was even more spirited than a big rooster. Yu Qianqiu said in astonishment, "Crow, is that you? How did you turn into a pheasant?" "You're the one who turned into a pheasant."
Ah!
The pheasant cried out in fear and flapped its wings to fly up. Its 2 claws were frantically clapping in the air. Yu Qianqiu's face instantly darkened. This wasn't the first time he saw this pheasant acting like it had stepped on dog poop. He had been humiliated like this in the Wu clan, but it was just a crow at that time. But this action undoubtedly proved that this pheasant in front of him was the crow of the past.
Ah!
This pheasant can talk. Zi looked at Wu Lixue and said in astonishment, "Shui, this pheasant is that crow of yours." "Shut up. I'm not a pheasant." The pheasant flapped its wings and arrived in front of Zi. It spoke in a clear and melodious voice. "I don't drink unless it's morning dew. I don't eat unless it's tender bamboo. And I don't perch unless it's 1,000-year-old parasol tree. I am a phoenix." Wu Lixue had heard these words more than once in the Wu clan. Back then, in order to correct Wu Lixue's bad habit of calling herself a crow, Crow had repeatedly warned Wu Lixue about these words. Wu Lixue, who was at the side, immediately applauded and cheered. "Little Sister Phoenix, you really came back to life. Big Sister Shui." The pheasant was also pleasantly surprised. It seemed to have tears in its eyes as it landed on Wu Lixue's shoulder. It hugged Wu Lixue's neck and whimpered, "That evil person didn't hurt you, right?" "No." A beautiful woman, and a pheasant gave off a strange feeling as if they had just escaped from death and met again. They were being overly sentimental. Ze immediately clicked her tongue and walked to Wu Lishua's side. She looked at the pheasant that could talk with curiosity. At this moment, the room's door was suddenly pushed open. Wei Chunqiu and Yunping stood side by side at the door. Their gazes swept across the room and locked onto Wu Lishua's shoulder. They had heard the conversation clearly from outside. They actually heard someone claiming to be a phoenix. The two of them were shocked and immediately opened the door to verify the situation. However, when they saw the pheasant on Wu Lishua's shoulder, they were a little confused. After all, they had never seen a phoenix before. They had only heard the legends of phoenixes. In the legends, phoenixes all had colorful feathers and were indescribably noble. How could it look like a pheasant? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. It was actually Yunpeng and Wei Chunqiu. Seeing that the two of them were staring at the pheasant on Wu Lishua's shoulder, he immediately laughed and said, "It's really rare for two seniors to come together. I wonder what noble purpose do you have?" The two of them looked at each other. Wei Chunqiu looked at the pheasant that was hugging Wu Lishua's neck and asked, "It's a phoenix?" Her tone was full of doubt. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He immediately said perfunctorily, "You heard it yawn like a toad. Do you think it looks like a phoenix? It's clearly a pheasant. You are the pheasant." When the pheasant heard someone insulting it, it immediately retracted its wings and jumped on Wu Lishua's shoulder. Its sharp eyes suddenly flashed with colorful light. It stared at Wei Chunqiu and Yunpeng and said, "So, it's a white-feathered great peng and a green bat. You actually dare to question this god's identity. How dare you?" Unexpectedly, Wu Lishua grabbed it and directly held it on his waist. He scolded, "Don't be rude to seniors." Then he nervously bowed to Wei Chunqiu and Yunpeng and said, "Two seniors, please don't be offended. It is still young and ignorant. Let me go. This god's bloodline is noble. I am a supreme royals among the birds. How can I bow to them?" The pheasant whimpered and struggled. However, it was tightly held by Wu Lishua. It couldn't use brute force to break free for fear of hurting Wu Lishua. However, it really felt that bowing to Wei Chunqiu and Yunpeng would make the phoenix lose face. It almost cried. Chapter 974. Yu Qianqiu saw some clues from the increasingly shocked expressions of Yunpeng and Wei Chunqiu. He knew that it was meaningless to continue perfunctorily, so he walked to Wu Lishua's side and casually slapped the pheasant's head. Then he smilingly scolded, "So, what if you're a phoenix? It's so big that even a bird can't compare. At most, it's a pheasant." This slap made the pheasant squeal. It struggled under Wu Lishua's arm. "Yu Qianqiu, you dare to hit this god." It shouted that it wanted to fight Yu Qianqiu to the death. Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with this useless fella that could be easily killed by Yan Zhuixing. He stretched his hand towards the door and walked out with Yunpeng and Wei Chunqiu. The three went up to the rooftop and set up a soundproof barrier. They stood side by side in front of the white jade railings. Yunpeng and Wei Chunqiu stood on the left and right of Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked into the distance. He wasn't in a hurry to speak. If they had any questions, they would ask him. The two early-stage Immortal Emperor experts were still shocked by the phoenix's roar. Although they didn't see the phoenix's sacred art with their own eyes, they were sure that the pheasant was a phoenix. The kung-kung sound they heard at first was the most powerful evidence. Secondly, it was rumored that after a phoenix hatched from its shell, it could speak the human language. This wasn't something that other beasts could compare with. It represented the extremely superior noble bloodline of a mythological beast. From the clear female voice it let out, it was clear that it was still a young phoenix. There was still a long way to go before it could become a truly majestic and noble phoenix. It still needed to grow. But even though it was still a young phoenix, the shock it brought to the two was indescribable. When the two came back to their senses, they felt their mouths were dry. Wei Chunqiu slowly turned around and looked at Yu Qianqiu like he was a monster. Just now, this fella had casually slapped the phoenix like he was bullying a wimpy kid. For these winged fellows, there were probably not many who dared to do so. And that girl, she actually held the phoenix under her arm like she was holding a chicken. What was wrong with this world? Could it be that the phoenix had no place in their eyes? However, what Wei Chunqiu couldn't figure out the most was that the phoenix was a divine beast that lived in the immortal realm. If it wanted to descend to the immortal realm, it should be a real adult phoenix. Why did a young phoenix appear, and why did it fall into this brat's hands? It was simply unimaginable. Yun Peng, who had also turned around, had the same thoughts. Yu Qianqiu, tell us honestly, where did you get this baby phoenix from? Wei Chunqiu held it in for a long time before saying this. I just happened to pick it up. Yu Qianqiu shrugged disapprovingly. You happened to pick it up? Wei Chunqiu and Yun Peng lost their voices at the same time. Yun Peng, who had always been calm, couldn't bear to listen any longer. His white sword-like eyebrows flew up as he coldly snorted. Yu Qianqiu, it seems like the two of us are nothing in your eyes. Do you think we're 3 years old? He just happened to pick up a phoenix. Then when did you happen to pick up a divine dragon for us to see? Yu Qianqiu looked at Yun Peng blankly and thought to himself, you really don't want to mess with this daddy. This daddy really did happen to meet a divine dragon, but the other party was a bit too scary, so it really wasn't easy to pick it up. If there's a chance, I'll take it out and let you have a good look. As long as you don't be afraid, it's fine. In any case, this daddy was scared shitless at that time and still doesn't dare to see it a second time. Looking at the two's expressions, he knew that if he didn't give a complete reason, he was afraid that they would be at odds with him. He shook his head, made a big circle with his hands, and said with a bitter smile, to be exact, at the beginning, I only picked up an egg. It was a very strange egg that could even glow, and it was about this big. Before, I didn't know that there was a phoenix inside. Even if it hatched, I didn't know that it was a phoenix. After all, I've never seen a phoenix before. It was that pheasant's mouth that was very cheap, and it kept chirping that it was some divine bird phoenix. That's what happened. There's nothing I can do if you don't believe me. In short, I really did pick it up. His words were half true and half false. It was impossible for him to reveal the things that happened in the human world, but his attitude could be considered sincere, and it didn't seem like he was faking it. Wei Chunqiu and Yun Peng looked at each other. The latter sized up Yu Qianqiu with a slightly judgmental gaze and said, even if it's a phoenix egg, I'm afraid that it can't be hatched just because you say so. Could it be that you know how to hatch a phoenix egg? His tone was full of doubt, and this was the biggest point that Yu Qianqiu's words gave the two the biggest doubt. You guys think too highly of me. Yu Qianqiu laughed and embarrassedly rubbed his hands. At that time, I really thought that the egg looked too strange. In fact, I didn't think it was an egg at first, but when I saw that it was actually glowing, I wanted to open it to see if there was any treasure inside. But you guys don't know, that egg was really too hard. I tried everything I could, but I couldn't open it. In the end, I really had no other choice, so I thought of a method that wasn't really a method and threw it into the fire. I just wanted to give it a try. Hee hee. Speaking of which, it was really a coincidence. No matter how much strength I used, I couldn't open it. In the end, when I burned it with fire, it really did burn, and that fellow jumped out from inside, claiming to be a divine bird phoenix. That's right. I still have that eggshell. Without hesitation, Yu Qianqiu immediately took out 2 pieces of the phoenix eggshell that he had collected and handed them to the two. In order to win their trust, it could be said that he didn't hold anything back. This was also an action that couldn't be helped. After all, at the moment, these 2 fellows were the only gold medal fighters that he could bring out. The slightly protruding surface of the eggshell was pitch black, and the slightly concave inside carried a brilliant silver splendor. It was very beautiful. The 2 held the item in their hands and examined it slightly. Immediately, their expressions were filled with fear. The 2 of them felt an awe-inspiring majesty from the eggshell. Humans might not be able to discover anything, but to the 2 of them, they had the feeling of wanting to pry into the secrets of the royal family, only to be met with a severe warning. The majesty directly shocked the 2 of them. All of the doubts in the two's hearts immediately disappeared. They were completely sure that this was the phoenix eggshell, so what Yu Qianqiu said to them was naturally also true. To be able to reveal such a matter that shouldn't be spoken of lightly to others, the way the two looked at Yu Qianqiu quietly changed.
Good stuff.
Wei Chunqiu looked at the eggshell in her hand in amazement. Then she looked at Yunpeng and said, "Yunpeng, if I'm not wrong, this thing should be of great benefit to you." Yunpeng silently nodded, but still returned it to Yu Qianqiu's hand. "Yunpeng, if I'm not wrong, this thing should be of great benefit to you." This was the first time Yu Qianqiu saw Yunpeng reveal a gaze filled with reluctance and desire towards something. He asked with some curiosity, "Senior Yun, why don't you tell me what benefit this thing has to you?" Yunpeng tried his best to shift his gaze away from the eggshell. He knew in his heart that if this eggshell was in the hands of someone else, he was afraid that he would go all out to snatch it, because this thing was too precious to him. However, he was still the man of Wei Chunqiu's adopted daughter, so he couldn't bring himself to do such a thing. Seeing that he didn't want to say anything, Yu Qianqiu looked at Wei Chunqiu suspiciously. Wei Chunqiu looked at the eggshell in her hand thoughtfully for a while, then suddenly frowned and said, "Phoenix egg. Phoenix egg. I seem to have heard of a legend a long time ago, but it's too long ago. I can't remember, but it seems I remember." Wei Chunqiu suddenly stared at Yunpeng and asked, "Could it be the legendary phoenix True Blood?" Yunpeng slowly turned his head, his eyes revealing a strange expression, and nodded vigorously. Wei Chunqiu suddenly came to a realization and said, "I understand, I finally understand. This thing is indeed of great benefit to you." "Phoenix True Blood?" Yu Qianqiu's heart itched when he heard this and pulled on Wei Chunqiu's big sleeve and said, "Bat King Wei, what is Phoenix True Blood?" Wei Chunqiu looked at him and seemed to be a little hesitant, as if considering whether to tell him or not. But looking at the eggshell in her hand, and then looking at Yunpeng, she finally organized her thoughts and said in a deep voice, "According to legend, the divine beasts of the god realm are the dragon and the phoenix, the beast sovereign, and the bird sovereign. To be able to become a sovereign, there is naturally something extraordinary that cannot be compared. According to legend, the phoenix will experience 9 tribulations, bathing in the flames of nirvana 9 times, and every time it successfully goes through a tribulation, its cultivation will become stronger. It can be said to be a kind of evolution in the midst of death, and it is very miraculous. However, Phoenix True Blood is not something that can be found in every phoenix. Only the blood of a phoenix that has experienced 9 tribulations is qualified to be called Phoenix True Blood, and only such a phoenix has the chance to give birth to a phoenix egg." Yu Qianqiu was startled, and looked at the eggshell in his hand, and said, "Then the connection between the two is very simple." Wei Chunqiu said with a serious expression, "Phoenixes are born to experience 9 tribulations, and can be said to have experienced many disasters before they can ascend to the position of sovereign and make all birds submit to them. Legend has it that when a phoenix lays an egg, it thinks of the many disasters that will befall its children in the future, and its heart is filled with grief, so it weeps blood and cries in sorrow. There seems to be a saying called "Phoenix weeps blood." In short, this means that when a phoenix lays an egg, the eggshell will be stained with Phoenix True Blood. With your intelligence, you should understand what I mean." Yu Qianqiu made an "oh" sound and shook the eggshell in his hand as he nodded repeatedly and said, "What you mean is that this eggshell is stained with Phoenix True Blood, and this Phoenix True Blood is very beneficial to Senior Yun. At least you are smart." Wei Chunqiu praised him, and then winked as he used his elbow to nudge Yu Qianqiu and said, "Look at how Senior Yun helps you protect the World Commerce Chamber every day, and even saved your life from the hands of Grey Cloud Xian last time. Even if he doesn't have meritorious service, he has worked hard. Shouldn't you show some appreciation?" The meaning of these words was very clear. It was nothing more than asking Yu Qianqiu to give this phoenix eggshell to Yunpeng. When these words came out, Ren Yunpeng, who was usually very calm, couldn't help but tremble slightly. He turned his head and didn't dare to look at Yu Qianqiu. Presumably, The heart in his chest was beating nonstop. Chapter 975. No problem. We're all a family, so it's not right if we don't help each other out. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and appeared to be exceptionally forthright. Yun Peng's body trembled as he turned around with an excited expression. He was preparing what words of gratitude he should say after Yu Qianqiu gave the item to him. Wei Chunqiu laughed heartily as he patted Yu Qianqiu's shoulder and said to Yun Peng, "Old bird, how is it? I didn't misjudge you, did I? You followed me, didn't you? You didn't think you'd encounter such a great opportunity, did you?" However, he was happy a bit too early. The item was said to be so precious that it could move Yun Peng's heart. With Yu Qianqiu's personality, it really wasn't in line with his personality if he carelessly gave it away. It won't be too late to give it away later. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of Wei Chunqiu's happy moment to take back the piece of eggshell in his hand. He coughed and said, "Let me figure out what benefits this Phoenix True Blood has for Senior Yun first. I won't be able to bear the responsibility if something unexpected happens." The two's expressions immediately froze. Yun Peng saw him take the item from Wei Chunqiu's hand and thought that he was going to personally give it to him. He was already prepared to take it, but who knew that these words would pop out? Wei Chunqiu also thought that he was going to give it to Yun Peng, so he allowed him to take it back. Otherwise, with Wei Chunqiu's personality, he would probably have kept a piece for Yun Peng even if he had to act shamelessly. Actually, this couldn't be blamed on Yu Qianqiu. He still had several dozen pieces of broken phoenix eggshells in his hands. How could he not figure out what they were used for? He couldn't just keep them in his hands like trash after knowing that they were treasures, right? At the very least, he needed to know how much he had helped Yun Peng so that he could ask for repayment in the future. "You brat, you can't be thinking of going back on your word, right?" Wei Chunqiu naturally felt like he had been played. "Look at what you're saying. My reputation is well known. Every spit is like a nail. My words are like a nail on a board. Unless the mountains have no edges and the heavens and earth merge together, I will not do anything that goes back on my word." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and promised solemnly, "I really want to know what benefits this Phoenix True Blood has for Senior Yun. I really want to know with a responsible attitude whether or not there will be any accidents." Although these words sounded a little exaggerated, Wei Chunqiu's expression finally became a little better. He thought to himself, "As long as you promise to give, it's fine. If you dare to go back on your word, Grandpa will openly rob you."
Bah.
Accident my ass. Are you trying to play some tricks? He first expressed his doubts before explaining, "The true blood of the phoenix is a precious treasure for birds. If one can absorb and refine it for their own use, not only can they borrow the power of the true blood to quickly increase their cultivation, if they are lucky, they can even obtain a chance to come back to life. After coming back to life, they will be like the phoenix, and their cultivation will be even more powerful. Of course, this depends on the amount of phoenix true blood on the eggshell." Resurrection from the dead. Oh my god, this is such a big favor. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but daydream absent-mindedly. I wonder what the effects will be after I absorb the true blood of the phoenix. I have the most phoenix eggshells. If I can be reborn like a crow in a critical moment, it will be too perfect. Looking at his drooling and wet dreams, Wei Chunqiu could no longer see what he was thinking. It was more like he was stupid. He immediately sneered and said, "Stop daydreaming here. The true blood of the phoenix is useless to humans. Even if I pour you a few buckets of true blood of the phoenix, you will still be like this. It is only effective on birds of feathers like the Yunpeng."
Why?
Yu Qianqiu suddenly woke up from his dream and asked with some grief and indignation. "There is no why. In short, it is useless to humans." Wei Chunqiu liked to see him like this. He sneered and said, "Forget about you. Even I am useless. The true blood of the phoenix can only be absorbed by birds of feathers."
Why?
"Don't try to fool me. Aren't you also a bird?" Yu Qianqiu's voice became a bit louder. The grief and indignation of having his dream shattered was clearly painted on his face. Although my original body also has a pair of wings, to be exact, I belong to the beast category and not the bird category. Although I am between the bird category and the beast category, I cannot enjoy the true blood of the phoenix. Wei Chuanqiu glanced at the eggshell in his hand and snorted coldly. I don't even feel wronged. What are you feeling wronged for? You must know that everything in the world has its gains and losses. There are enough benefits from humans. Don't tell me you want to fight for this as well? Hearing him say this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a bit better. He was suddenly startled and said, Bat King Wei, you said you are between the bird category and the beast category. Could it be that the word beast originated from your Bat clan? You are the beast. Do you want to die? Wei Chuanqiu immediately became angry. Joking. Don't be angry, don't be angry. After making fun of the other party, Yu Qianqiu's heart finally felt a bit better. However, he still said unwillingly, even birds like Senior Yun and the others can obtain benefits from the God Realm. Can't we also obtain some benefits from the God Realm? Of course, as long as you have the ability to do it. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he asked, what kind of benefits? Speaking of this, Wei Chuanqiu became serious and said with a serious expression, have you forgotten what I told you before? Among the top divine beasts in the God Realm, dragons and phoenixes are revered. Legend has it that there is an illusory god in the God Realm. Even the gods in the God Realm have never seen his true body. No one knows if he is a man or a woman, and no one knows how high his cultivation is. Legend has it that this illusory god usually doesn't communicate with anyone but will directly communicate with dragons and phoenixes. It is said that dragons and phoenixes are his messengers. When he encounters something that needs to be done with force, he will order dragons to do it on his behalf, while phoenixes are responsible for delivering his decrees. Dragons and phoenixes can be said to be his messengers. So, awesome. You dare to play tricks in front of all living beings in the God Realm. You're really amazing. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a while, and then he came to a realization. This matter is too far away. What does it have to do with the benefits you told me? Of course it has something to do with it. Your benefits are in the body of the dragon who is in charge of war. Wei Chuanqiu laughed and said, Phoenixes have phoenix true blood. Dragons also have coiling dragon true blood. The so-called coiling dragon has the meaning of occupying the land and overlooking all living beings. It represents the supreme of the dragon race. Ordinary dragons don't dare to be crowned with the title of coiling dragon. Its rank is equivalent to that of a phoenix that has gone through 9 tribulations. As long as you find the coiling dragon that is like a 9 tribulations phoenix, capture it and release some coiling dragon true blood, then smear it on your whole body to ensure that the toughness of your skin is unparalleled in the world. I reckon that the treasures in the immortal world won't be able to harm you at all. This benefit is not bad, right? TSK. If the coiling dragon true blood really has this benefit, then it is indeed very good. Yu Qianqiu suddenly reacted after a moment of relaxation. He said with a dark face, Old Bat, are you playing with me? Just think about it, the 9 tribulations phoenix was already very powerful. The martial envoy coiling dragon who was in charge of war was naturally even more amazing. If he had the ability to capture the coiling dragon and release his blood, then wouldn't he be able to do whatever he wanted in the immortal world? Even immortal Emperor Jin Tai wouldn't be a problem. There would be no need to go through so much trouble.
What are you playing with?
This is an ancient legend that I heard by chance from an elder. Ordinary people don't have the opportunity to hear it even if they want to. I'm telling you for free is already letting you off easy. Wei Chuanqiu pointed at Yunpeng, who was also listening with a face full of yearning, and said, If you don't believe me, ask him if he has heard of it before. Yu Qianqiu looked at Yunpeng suspiciously. Yunpeng was startled for a moment before shaking his head at Yu Qianqiu. His white sword-like eyebrows suddenly trembled as he stared at Wei Chuanqiu and slowly asked, The elder who told you these legends, could it be the one who told you about the past of Zheng, Yi, and Ming? Wei Chuanqiu was startled for a moment before he nodded with a respectful expression and said, I was really lucky to meet him and hear some stories from him. he said with a sigh, as if he was very nostalgic. Seeing the two talking so mysteriously, Yu Qianqiu's curiosity was piqued again. When he heard the story of Tai Shu Zheng, demon god Yi, and the woman named Ming from Wei Chuanqiu's mouth, he once suspected something. Although immortal Emperor Jin Tai had ruled the immortal world for countless years, the era of Zheng, Yi, and Ming was long before Jin Tai. Almost no one in the immortal world knew about such a long time ago, but the elder Wei Chuanqiu spoke of was able to know the secrets of Zheng, Yi, and Ming. Obviously, he was not an ordinary person. That King Wei, who is this elder you're talking about? Yu Qianqiu curiously asked. However, after Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng looked at each other, they seemed to be a bit secretive and didn't say anything. The more it was like this, the more Yu Qianqiu's heart itched. He immediately threw the matter of being tricked to the back of his mind and pulled Wei Chuanqiu's sleeve like a child asking for candy. He chuckled and said, "We are all family. What is there to hide? If it's really inconvenient to say it, I won't force you. Why don't you find an opportunity to introduce me to this elder? Let me see the elegant demeanor of the senior." He still liked to walk the path of the higher-ups. Don't always pull and pull, okay? Wei Chuanqiu pulled back her sleeve from Yu Qianqiu's hand and waved her hand with a dignified expression. Don't ask me this again in the future. This elder is not someone you can meet just because you want to. Everything depends on fate. If you are really fated to meet him, you will meet him sooner or later.
All right.
Don't get sidetracked. Give the thing to Yunpeng. Yunpeng also nodded with a dignified expression as if he knew something about this elder. After observing their expressions, Yu Qianqiu knew that it was useless to continue asking. It seemed that he would have to start with Bai Suzhen if there was a chance in the future and let Bai Suzhen ask Wei Chuanqiu. Presumably, with Bai Suzhen's help, they would be able to dig out the identity of this mysterious elder from Wei Chuanqiu's mouth. The reason why he was so curious was that people of Wei Chuanqiu and Yunpeng's age and level generally wouldn't easily call anyone elder. Even with immortal Emperor Jin Tai's power, age, and cultivation, the two of them wouldn't call him elder. If there was someone older, the two of them might call him old ghost or something like that. But for someone like this to respectfully call him elder when he wasn't even in front of him, it was a bit strange. This person was most likely not simple. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.